1983, Brora, Port Ellen, Banff, Dallas Dew, St Magdalene, all closed. 1985, Colburn and Conville Moor, closed. 1993, Rosebank, closed. 1994, Little Mill, closed. 1995, Arran, opened. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. See you in a wee minute. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Thursday night. Welcome to the vPub. I hope you're all doing very, very well. I'm excited about tonight. I'm hoping it's going to be an interesting one, a good one tonight, because we're going to celebrate what's become one of my favourite distilleries, actually one of the community's favourite distilleries, if we're honest, in recent years, and that is Arran. I was struck quite recently by a post that went out in social media. And it was a post by one of the brand ambassadors at Arran, and he was just sharing an upcoming release from them, an official bottling and a 25-year-old release. Immediately that struck me. I found it quite jarring because I remember a time when Arran was a new distillery and quite an unknown thing. So today, when we think about the kind of the wave, let's say, of new distilleries that we have, we need to kind of look back to 1995. And spend a wee bit of time tonight celebrating the bravery of that bold step and just how big a deal that was in the mid-90s. To not only be opening a new distillery, but to be opening a distillery for malt whiskey's sake, one that was not going to be about blending or the blending industry, one that was not going to be doing or focusing on, let's say, cask fillings, but one that was going to be pointed directly at enthusiasts. So I reached out to Andy and I said, Andy, what do you think about coming on to the vPub and us giving up a vPub to celebrate the fact that Arran are now 25 years old? James MacTaggart, the production director for Arran, is going to come on and join me in a few minutes, and we're going to get a chance to relax for a little while, have a dram or two, and just talk about the stories and the last few years with Arran Distillery. Now, I'm hearing something. I'm hearing myself back, and I don't know where it's coming from. I wonder. I hope the sound is okay at your side. I'll pull up the chat. I'll welcome in some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. And maybe you can tell me if the audio is okay at your side. Gav O'Connor is in. Good to see you, Gav. Good to have you, my friend. He's saying good evening, and it's good evening to you as well, Gav. It's nice to welcome you in. Tom Bueller Bells is here. David Caballero, good evening from Colombia, everybody. Daniel, sorry, I said David Caballero. Daniel, it's wonderful to welcome you here, my friend. Bienvenido. I hope I'm pronouncing that well. Dogs have no uncles. Good to see you, my friend. It sounds fine on my end. Wonderful stuff. Good. Hellswood is here, Donald Ranson, Canada, Neil Laverty, Andrew Pears. Andrew, thank you very much for joining Aquavitae Barflies. It's nice to have you in. For anybody that's wondering what that's all about, it gives you access. It's a way to support the channel, honestly. It's the YouTube membership scheme. You click the join button underneath the video there, and you get access to the fun emojis and things that you'll see people using in the live chat. You can also use them in the comments after the video as well. Andrew, welcome at the Barflies, and thanks for your support. Philip Story is here. Audio is fine here. Thanks, Philip, and good to welcome you in, my friend. Greg's Whiskey Guide in France. Frank Peathead is here. Sometimes I hear myself, he's saying, normally when he's had too much to drink. Yes, I'm hearing myself, and I don't know where it's from. I can't fathom if it's... I'm just going to mute these other feeds that's sitting in the background, just in case that's where it's coming from. Don't know if that's going to help it. Hopefully you're not getting an echo at your side, but I can hear myself, and there's nothing worse than hearing your own voice. Greg is also telling me that the audio is okay. Floyd Rodriguez is here. Jimmy Legg, fantastic to see you, Jimmy. Always wonderful to have you in. Cresimir is here. Gino in Canada. Dancing Midgie, Glenn, wonderful to see you, my friend. Hope the weather's okay up north. Tom R is here as well, out in Chicago. Tom, always a pleasure to welcome you. Richard Hall from Nottingham, Menno in Belgium, Alistair Gray up north, Radek, Spirit Bomb, Supersonic chat tonight, can't keep up. 240 of you in already, and we're only just a few minutes into the stream. Not going to keep you too long. We'll get our guest in quite early tonight and just maximise his time. I'll start with a wee story about me personally with Arran, and I shared this with my patrons this week. I was in a whisky shop in Glasgow. I don't even know if the whisky shop exists anymore, but it's the one that used to be down close to the Mitchell Street parking. A wee tiny shop, and I had a bottle of something in my hand, and the woman in the shop suggested that I have a look at something new, and she put a bottle of Arran 10-year-old in my hand, and I looked at this thing, and it was a kind of a cream and gold label. I think I've just worked out where the audio is coming from. Fantastic. It was a kind of cream and gold label, and it just simply said Arran on the label, and I had never heard of Arran. I actually thought it was a blend. And she said, no, it's a brand new distillery, the first one on the island. And I thought, oh, that's fantastic, but why would I buy a brand new whiskey? Why would I buy something that's just out the traps? They've only been going this 10-year-old. This is their oldest product. That's why she was excited, because there was a 10-year-old product from them. And I didn't buy it. And I walked away in my naivety. Now, since then, I've come to love Arran. Over my shoulder here, you'll see about 8 bottles or so from those guys. And anybody that's been watching me for long enough will learn just how much I love Arran, because they're one of these distilleries that's very much in sync with the enthusiasts. They're putting a product out there of good quality, natural presentation, natural colour, a good 46% ABV, so they're not chill filtering as well. Even when they bring out a product that doesn't have an age statement on it, it only takes an inquiry straight to the distillery for you to work out a wee bit more about the casking and the makeup of the whiskey. They're very open and very transparent, and that's very encouraging. The value is good as well, and we can most of the time connect with whiskey that we can all afford. All of these things deserve to be celebrated, and I think the fact also that distillery is now 25 years old. So I'm going to chat to you guys for a second, and I'm going to grab my guests tonight. Royale431 has bought me a dram. He's saying, evening, Roy and Barflies. Nice to be able to join for once. This working for a living malarkey is nae good. Listen, I hear you, my friend, but we've all got to earn a crust. Thank you very much for giving me a wee bit of yours and buying me a virtual dram. Cheers, my friend. Slancher to you. And Jimmy Legg, thank you, Jimmy. He's bought me a dram as well. Did you find out if that's your great-great-grandfather that managed Klein Leishroy? Do you know what I'm going to do, Jimmy? I'm going to get that picture, and I'm going to show people what you're talking about, because I am convinced that I have found a relation in the whiskey industry here. I don't know if it looks anything like me, this guy, but there is a look that man has, and it is very, very familiar to me. I should give people the backstory. Jimmy posted something in Aquavitae Barfly's page on Facebook, and he shared a picture, and he said, I wonder if this is a relation. It was one of the 1930s managers of Klein Leash Distillery up in Sutherland in the Highlands. And he wondered if it was a family relation. This is the picture that he shared in the Barflies page. I'll try and let that focus. We're looking at Mr. William Duff. Now, I've got a close-up here. We can zoom in a wee bit and see the likeness here. Now, I have to tell you all that I've got baby pictures of me that look exactly like this. There are baby pictures of my son that look like this. There are people in my family. I've got cousins and uncles, and I see my family in this man's face. It's jarring. It's just so. I was talking to my brother about it, and the two of us were almost silent. So we've put it out to other people in the family that have done some kind of lineage and checking into the family tree to see if anybody's happened upon a William Duff from the 30s that could have potentially been a manager at Klein Leash. But that would maybe help explain my affinity with that distillery up in the Highlands, because perhaps Yes, perhaps I've always known that I had a connection there. Who knows? Whiskey Throttle, Daniel. Daniel, you've been to Arran. You've spent time with James MacTaggart over there. He's in Aquaviti. Very happy to see you have a guest. I have personally met Mr. MacTaggart. Not only gave me a bottle straight from the barrel for the tour group, plus a personal trip to Lagg still being built. Daniel, thank you so much, my friend. I got to hang out with you as well when you were over on that trip, and I hope it's not your last. Thank you for your dram, my friend, and thanks for joining tonight. Cheers. Daniel Whiskey Throttle, he's the John Wayne of whiskies over in Alberta and Canada. Aye, so I'm curious to find out if I've got a relation up at Clynelish Distillery. I want to just shout out a couple of thanks quickly to the community. Sid Martin gave me a lovely little gift package, some really nice drams, but he included his wedding bottle in there as well for me to share with patrons as well in an upcoming lockdown. I'm going to give one of these away. He's sent one for me, and another one to give away to the community. And this is a 1977 Macallan, 30-year-old. None of us can really connect or afford Macallan. None of us can really enjoy that type of thing. So it's a really wonderful gesture from Sid to give us his a wee share of his wedding bottle. And I'll share that with patrons. And I need to figure out a way to share this as well. It's a full bottle of Kilkerran 16-year-old. I managed to get myself a bottle of Kilkerran 16. It's already open and I'm enjoying it very much. Thank you. But this was actually sent in from Barfly and long-term Patreon supporter Alistair Gray. He's also a moderator. He's often in the chat looking after me regularly. But he's written on the label, to the Aquaviti Barflies from Alistair Gray. He's written it on the tube as well. He just donated this to me in the hope that I could find a way to share this Kilkerran 16 with some of the community that aren't able to get their hands on it. It's difficult to get the Kilkerran 16 because there's only a few thousand bottles globally. So I thought that was a wonderful, wonderful gesture from Alistair. Thank you so much, Alistair. You're a star, and I will find a way to share that. Then I got a package in from Scotch on the Bayou Leanne over in Louisiana, who's just a gorgeous energy to have in the whiskey community. I love her to death. She may or may not be in here tonight. I know that it's she's about 6-7 hours behind us, but she sent a lovely package. She had some Louisiana Bayou honey in there. She had some books for the kids, everything, but she had a special gift for me. Leanne sent this. This is a perfect purple recycling wheelie bin. Perfect nod to recycled reviews. I was just absolutely blown away that such a thing would exist. Not only that a little miniature wheelie bin exists, but it's actually in the right colour for the recycled bin itself. I was absolutely blown away by it. Leanne, thank you so much. You're a star, and I'm looking forward to the next time that you grace our shores, that we can get together and share a wee dram. Welsh Doro is insane. Give me some, mate. Share the love. Welsh, I'll do my very, very best. I don't know how to do it. It's always difficult to share whiskey. It's not a legal thing to do. Oftentimes, it's okay for us to kind of wrap it up carefully and ship it locally. But when we're shipping and sharing over borders, we need to be careful. So there always has to be a wee bit of care and a bit of due diligence, I suppose. But I will work out a way to get the Kilkerran 16 out to those that don't get a chance to try it. Bart is saying, is it Kilkerran tonight, though? No, it is not. It is very much all about Arran. Jimmy Legg's putting in a barfly emoji of the recycled bin there as well. Fantastic stuff. Okay, let's just get started. Let's get James in. Looking forward to tonight. Already had a chance to chat to James on the tech check and things like that, and just kind of, he was very open from the start. This is going to be a very candid discussion. Just nice to be able to connect with somebody who's had 45 years in the industry already. Looking forward to introducing you, everybody that hasn't met James yet. So I'll reach out to James. I'll ask him for a wee thumbs up if he's in good shape, and I'll welcome in the production director and master blender from Arran Distillers, James MacTaggart. James, welcome to the vPub, my friend. How are you? Oh, just 1 second. I have to.
Hi, people.
Yep. Sorry, I had you on mute, James. You're well there. You're well, yes?
I'm well, yes, and nice to speak to you. And all your Barfly, what could I say, members?
Yes, the barflies are here. There's coming up 283 of them in tonight as well. I knew you'd be a popular guest, James. People are keen to hear all about your time at Arran and previous. You're coming in from Isla right now. You're coming from Bamore on Isla, yes?
I'm in Bamore and Isla, yes.
Okay, let's
It's been
hope
a
the
beautiful,
internet.
been a good day here too, Roy.
Okay,
One of the few good days we're having.
It's been quite calm and clear here today too. So let's hope the internet holds up. James, you've been 45 years in whisky, and I know that you've spent I think you were up to about 30 years at Bamore before you joined Arran around about 2007, if I'm correct, and you've been kind of guiding and steering the whisky and the releases from Arran since then.
That's right, Roy, yes.
I'm going to start you. I opened tonight's stream with talking about the closed thing. And I want to kind of, just in order to start the discussion tonight, I want to kind of tell the backstory to that. I was in Germany. I was at the Interwhisky Festival. I was at the last tasting, perhaps the last tasting of the weekend, actually, with my friend who's in here tonight, Doc McAllen Fine and Rare. And we were in this tasting at the end of the day, and everybody was in good mood, very boisterous spirits, let's say. We were feeling no pain. And there was a room of about 60, 70, 80 people in this tasting. And who was hosting the tasting but your sales manager, your brand ambassador, and Andy Bell, this kind of wee Glaswegian guy standing down at the front of the room, welcoming all these big, burly, happy Germans and these people coming in for the last tasting. And I could see that he was looking at everybody, and he could hear and he could feel how the room was. And he was thinking, geez, I've got the short straw here. I've got the last tasting. But he stood up and he dug deep, and in his biggest, boldest Glaswegian accent, he just shouted out, "Welcome everybody!" And he welcomed everybody into the room, and he tried very, very hard to grab everybody's attention. And he was doing a good job, a very good job. But then he stood up and he did exactly what I did at the opening of this stream. He listed off the distilleries closed: Brora, Port Ellen, St Magdalen closed, Rosebank closed, Little Mill 1994 closed, Arran 1995 open. And the room was suddenly paying attention. This wasn't just a lineup of whiskies. They were actually about to hear something that happened in 1995 that was very, very significant. Now, today, new distilleries it seems like every month there's another new distillery. But you guys are officially the oldest new distillery. Is that difficult to imagine for you now?
It is. I mean, I can go back to the days when all these distilleries were closed, and even at Bamore, we were down to a 3-day week. So the industry was at one time, and it was in a very bad way. And there was no new distillery starting up till early 1990s. Harold Curry had was retiring as managing director of Chivas. He decided his own dream really was to start his own distillery. So in the beginning of the 1990s, the idea was formulated, and in 1995 it actually happened. And in June 1995, the first spirit ran off the stills, and it was another 10 years after that before Kilcormac came along. That was the next one. So it was something that had been done.
It would have been a crazy thing, right? To back, you're talking about Mr. Curry back in the early 90s, suggesting that not only a new distillery when nobody was, the only thing that was happening was closing distilleries, but opening a new distillery on a west coast of Scotland island that at best had, maybe 200-year-old history, and before that it was all about illicit distilling, really. Really crazy concept.
I mean, going back a long time, over 100 years, the 150 years, there was a lot of distilling in Arran, but it was all illegal. There was only couple of legal distilleries ever in Arran. And Arran could quite easily have gone to Isla, whereas all these distilleries, Isla had an awful lot of distilleries at one time. But, some of them became very, very successful in businesses now, but Arran could have gone that way, but for some reason or other, all these distilleries in Arran disappeared till 1995 when Isle of Arran Distillers started the distillery in Lochranza.
Exactly. Now, I know that I can already tell by the way you're speaking and the way you're answering that you're mindful of the fact you're probably thinking about your 30 years at Bowmore. You remember a time probably working at Bowmore, being on Islay, where you couldn't give the stuff away, right? It was very, very tough. You talked about being down to a 3-day week, perhaps lots of distilleries shuttered and mothballed at times. You would have witnessed the worst.
It was a boom and bust at that time. You know, you're working 7 days. I can remember one year it started in January, working 7 days a week. By Easter, we were down to 3 days. It was really a boom and bust business then. But nowadays it's much more, what could I say, organised, and the projections are far better for, you know, production than what it was these days. But in these days, you know, single malts were not, you know, were not dominant. It was a very, very small business. Single malts was not a big business. It was all blends, and you was basically making whiskey for blends. And then there was whiskey loss created, and then there was too much whiskey, and that's where everything closed down. But nowadays it's much better organised. Everybody, as I said, the projections are much better on where everybody's going, what the production, you know, what the production should be for each year.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there, you know, back in the days that when all the market was on the back of blends. Most of the distilleries on Islay, including Bowmore, very little of that was ever bottled as single malt, you know, single-digit percentage at best, maybe 2 or 3% of the output. Most of it was going into blends. But I think that's what we see as a huge shift generally across the industry now, where so much more of it is chasing that lucrative side, the extra margins and the interest that's in single malt. But Arran has been created there from the get-go purely to service that market. So that, I mean, that's a significant thing in itself. You know, that there was no, did Arran ever produce any product that went into contractor for blends?
We still do not. I mean, next year we're going to be doing, between the two sites, between Lochranza and Lagg Distillery, we'll be producing 1 million litres of alcohol, but there's none of that contracted to another company. That's solely for our own single malts.
That 1 million litres, so that's you already up at the size. Over the two distilleries, that's you up producing the same size as, say, a Glengoyne.
Yeah.
Much more established, a much better, well-known kind of brand, a much more well-known brand. Danny McKinley is in, he said, cheers Royale, and Distillery is my personal favourite. We have a baby due in 2 weeks, and my wife has agreed we can name the baby Arran if it's a boy. Danny, I want to thank you for your drama, friend, and that's wonderful news. I wish you all the very best for when the baby comes along, and if it is a boy, we'll raise a wee glass, maybe in a future vPub, to baby Arran. But regardless, congratulations, my friend, and thanks for letting us know. Anybody that's trying to get hold of my attention, there's somebody looking after me and behind the scenes tonight. We've got Jackie in from Arran in the background, and she's in as at Arran Whisky. So if you're trying to get my attention, please type at Aquavitae. But if you want to get some help from Jackie to get some questions across to me, at Arran Whisky, and Jackie will hopefully be able to feed through some questions to me as well. Anybody that's tuning in from Facebook, I appreciate there's probably some people that's maybe come across from the Facebook shares, the White Stags group, for instance, for Arran and things like that. If you are watching on Facebook, that's fine. You're welcome to watch, but it's very difficult for me to catch, see, or interact with the comments on Facebook. So maybe you might want to come into YouTube and pick up, hang out with other barflies on the YouTube feed. It's a bit more fun and a bit more interactive in here as well. So, I mean, James, you came across from, what was your position at Bowmore, first of all? How was your career at Bowmore before you came across to Arran? We'll spend just a second giving you some, a bit of a story CV.
I was the senior operator at Bowmore, because how I came to Arran was, I was a senior operator at Bowmore, and I got a phone call one evening from James MacTaggart, who was at Bruichladdich at the time, and James knew me from my Bowmore days. And James says he's interested in a distillery manager's job in Arran. I said, well, I'll find out about it. He says, here's the phone number. So I phoned Douglas Davidson. is. And I think anybody in Scotland know who's Ruth Davidson is. So I met Youth. I met Douglas and Ewan. Ewan Mitchell was at that time. He was the sales director. I met them. Ended up in that because at the time they'd advertised the job a couple of times, but nobody had basically come forward that they felt was the right person for the job. Because Arran is very much you basically make up your own. What could I say? Yeah, Arran at that time was, you were going there and you had to have the experience of how to make whiskey. You had to have the experience of how a distillery runs. It wasn't somebody that could come in that was just going to manage the place. It was somebody that had to have the experience to basically run the plant. And I've always said that a good distillery manager is somebody who knows what his plant is capable of producing. And I think that's very, very important. And
so they needed somebody to come in and grab it by the reins. So what you're talking about is the entire production. You're talking about focusing on the malts that's going to be released. You're talking about wood management and maturation, the whole thing. Yep.
Oh, the quality of the malted barley you're taking in, the whole thing. It's a complete package. You don't have, Arran, and it still doesn't have, basically there's in the makeup of Arran itself and the company itself, there's 5, and it's something maybe some of your members are interested in what the company is. The company there's 5 directors in the company, and Ewan Mitchell is the managing director, and I'm the production director. So it's a very, very small company, and it's got one major shareholder, but it means that decisions are made instantly. No sort of tail upwards where somebody's got to ask somebody else, and then somebody else, and then somebody else, till it gets to the top, and then they decide what's going to happen. Everything's done basically in Arran on site and immediately. It's no long. You're not waiting for anything to happen. It just happens instantly.
And I think we see that as consumers. We can see and we can feel that there is an independence there. There is that you are carving out your own kind of furrow. You're doing your own thing, and you're the way that you present the whiskies. There was a time that there were so many releases coming out that it was difficult to keep up, honestly, a few years back. But that seems to have been brought back into control. You've now got established brands and the likes of the Macri Moor and the core ranges. There's things that we can recognise and come to learn. So, what that culture is coming through. We can see that kind of independent spirit in the releases.
When Douglas Davison was the managing director, Douglas felt that, to promote Arran, he did an awful lot of cask finishes, wine cask finishes. And because we hadn't reached 10 years old, there wasn't a standard product there. I think he wasn't far wrong, but basically we had to get rid of that because we didn't want to be seen as a wine cask finish. We wanted to produce a product that was 10, eventually 14, 18-year-old. We wanted a core product that wasn't going to be based in wine cask finish.
That's basically
the 10. Yep.
Yeah. And this is ex-bourbon cask, isn't it? The standard 10. I know that it's actually been repackaged. This is the new branding for it.
It's what we do. What I've done at Arran is there's a very solid wood policy. We fill about 80% fresh bourbons, about 10% refills, and 10% sherry hogsheads. Basically, that's what the wood policy is. So the 10-year-old at the moment is probably about 80% bourbon and 20% sherry. So there's a mix there in the 10-year-old. It's not all bourbon.
Okay, understand. There's a definite toffee sweetness there. I notice it. And whereas I remember the 10-year-old, maybe not this one, but previous releases of the 10-year-old was a much lighter, more kind of floral, citrus orange blossom type thing. Now we're seeing something that's coming along that probably tells a tale of maybe your depths of stocks that you have nowadays. That's got a bit that's a bit more rounded out. It's a bit richer. It's a bit fuller. A bit sweeter.
I would agree with what you're saying there, Roy. That's what we're aiming for.
Okay, this is quite interesting. Is that this is the 10-year-old I used to buy. This is the 10-year-old that I fell in love with. This is what got me into Arran, honestly. But I quickly, obviously in the last couple of years, it changed to this new packaging. But I was in Islay in the Bridgend store, and they had one of these. My dusty Lexi on the shelf. I bought this on Islay when I was there a couple of weeks ago, so you'll know where Bridgend is. That's where I went for my firewood, and I picked up a wee cheeky bottle of 10-year-old Arran as well.
It's not really known as a whisky shop in Islay, but the store's quite a number of bottles in there. So some of them have probably been there for a couple of years.
In my experience, it seems like every shop is a whiskey shop on Islay.
Uh-huh.
They've all got their wee stash of whiskey there. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to visit. So we've got your the kind of the whiskey just coming along, maturing year by year, people connecting with it and talking about it more and more. And when I say connecting with it and talking about it, I'm talking about at an enthusiast level, people that are going into specialist retailers, buying whiskey online, visiting the distilleries maybe to pick it up. There's more and more chatter and excitement being coming around Arran. And I remember when the 18-year-old was released as well, people were like, wow, we've got an 18-year-old from Core Range from Arran. It's amazing. And the 21-year-old that was released as well. My wife bought this for me the year it was released, so I've maybe had this probably 3 years, 4 years or something. An amazing, super complex whiskey. And now we're at the stage, quite amazing, that we have a 25-year-old product. Are all of the whiskies that we're seeing now, the Arran Core Range and the Macrimur, etc., are they all your whiskies, James?
They're all my whiskey, yes. For my sins, Roy. But
the buck stops with you.
What I try to produce, Roy, is that, everybody agrees when they go into the warehouse and get a warehouse dram out of the cask. That's the best. You can't get a better dram than that. That's the best dram. It's straight out of the cask. So basically, what I'm trying to produce in the bottlings as we go through is, something similar. You're not going to get, exactly the same thing, but that's the aim, is to try and replicate what that warehouse dram is. That's why we don't colour, we don't overfilter, we don't do anything like that. We're trying to get that what you get in the warehouse, we're trying to get that into the bottle.
Well, let me extrapolate that discussion. Let me talk about that a wee bit further, because when I enjoy Arran and I want to celebrate Arran, of course it's because I'm enjoying the whiskey and I'm able to buy the whiskey at fairly reasonable prices, okay? But I think that there's something about Arran that needs to be applauded that isn't done enough in the industry. And I'll just hold up this 10-year-old again. This is on every release of Arran. It was on the old labelling and it's much more prominent in the new labelling. Look at what it says up here. It clearly says, if this camera will focus on it, if I get my face out the way, maybe it'll focus eventually, you'll see non-chill filtered and natural colour.
Yep.
This is written on all the Arran product. How important is that? Are those policies to you, James?
Very, very important, because I've been right through the whole business. I was in the warehouses at Beaumont, and I was, right through the whole system. So we're 40 odd years in the industry. That's, I feel that is what a proper single malt Scotch whisky is. And that's what I'm saying. We're trying to replicate what you're getting in the warehouse and into the bottle. That's important to me, is to try and do that. Trying to get that done.
So, in your experience, let's imagine it. In the past, you would have been involved in projects or blends or at releases where because of market expectation, whatever the reason, it's gone through a process such as chill filtration. Would you say, in your experience, that you feel that removes something from the whiskey that you're starved of something? Can you taste a difference?
In my opinion, and it's my opinion, is that there's a slight taste. You're taking something out of there that's not, you want it to be as natural as possible, and you're pulling something out of there that I feel that should be left in there.
So it's a flavour compound as well as I feel I just can't imagine how it would not affect the texture and how it interacts on the palate and things like that with those fats and oils that could potentially be removed. I mean, it's malt whiskey. To me, it's such a precious thing. I don't want anything removed from it.
No. You want it as natural as possible.
And likewise, I think one of the unfortunate things about malt whiskey in Scotland, as well as other countries as well, yes, absolutely, it's permitted to add spirit caramel to colour the whiskey as well. Now we know we can just boldly go right ahead and buy any product from Arran Distillery in the knowledge that we know that all your malts are natural colour and they state it on the label. It's fantastic. Not only are you saying we naturally colour it, but you're going one step further. You're putting it on the label, and you have to be applauded for that. So there's never a temptation for you when you are you kind of embracing color variation, or do you use vatting to try and kind of smooth out the colors, or do you not really care? You've kind of got the colors that you need.
With some of the bottlings we use, I prefer to vat it before it goes to bottling. Make sure that the color is what I'm happy with, because the unfortunate thing is, well, in most cases where people don't know anything about single malt whiskey, colour, if they go into the shop, they see a bottle that's nice and dark, that's what they'll go for. I mean, that's well known, that's what's going to happen. So for us, we've got to vat it and try and bring out try and get casks into that vatting that's going to add a wee bit of colour to that vatting.
So if we grab this 10-year-old again, this is not I think there's been paler releases from Arran, honestly, in the past. Everyone can see this is not a pale whiskey, but as James has already mentioned, there's potentially 10-20% sherry going to be in here, some first fill bourbon as well.
And
so the natural whiskey,
that's what adds a wee bit of colour to it as well.
Yeah. So it's more than just the flavour profile. You're getting that nice kind of rich colours out of it too.
Yeah.
Daniel Caballero is now this. It looks like it's a Colombian currency because he's bought me a dram that is 10,000 of something. I've never had a dram like that before, Daniel. Thank you very much. He's saying I'm having some Arran 18 tonight. It's a wonderful dram. Thanks, Arran, and Slanchova to you all. I have to say, James, I love your whiskey. I was a fan of the 10, big fan of the 14. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to put you on the spot on the 14. It was my whiskey of the year a couple of years ago. I loved it. I thought it was the perfect optimal release of Arran style, let's say, if you have a style. But last year, another tasting in Germany, actually coincidentally hosted by Andy as well, we got to try the 18-year-old, and it was up against some single cask releases and things for that market. It was up against some stiff competition, and I loved it. It really blew me away. I'm going to open this tonight. I'm just going to open it, but I'm reluctant to, because the last time I bought a bottle of this, I don't think it lasted 6 weeks in my collection. I opened it. I think I opened it live. I got through it very, very quickly. I love this bottle. That's what Daniel Caballero is enjoying over in Colombia as well. Tell me about this one, because look at the color of this. That's a joy in its natural color. It says on the label again, we can trust that the color we're looking at is natural. What are we looking at here in the 18-year-old, James?
And the at that time when the spirit was laid down for the 18-year-old, there was a lot of sherry casks used for that. So predominantly sherry casks in the 18-year-old. That's where you get a nice dark colour, Roy.
And would you be using American oak, European oak, or a mix of both?
It's a mix of both. I mean, most sherry hogsheads these days are made from American oak. There's not a great deal used of European oak used.
It can be tough to get a hold of European oak, absolutely. I know. It's one of these controlled woods. It's super expensive when you do get a hold of it, I understand. I'm going to bring in Andy a wee bit later. I've mentioned Andy a couple of times in the stream. But I want to mention to everybody, when I do bring in Andy, or any time at all, any questions that you want to put regarding about your experiences with Arran, well, we've got James and Andy in here. Make sure you try to grab our attention. I know it can be tricky. I'll do my very, very best to catch your comments. But when Andy's in, Ask any questions about the whiskies, about the current range, whatever you want to ask. Glenn Duncan is saying, loving the chat with James. I need to expand my Arran experience to that 18-year-old. Wow, look at the colour. Not just the colour, Glenn. You want it. You want experience. It's got all the things that you would expect from a sherry matured whiskey. And I think I'm going to put this to James. There's a juiciness here. There's a sweet, round, easy drinking, full, luscious juiciness to it that I think must be the fact that it's maybe from sherry hogsheads, from that American oak, which is it's less dry, less tannic, less acrid, let's say, and a wee bit more kind of sweet from that American oak. I think that is that maybe why this is. I've not tried this yet.
Yep.
I'm going from my experience in the last bottle.
It's a mixture. It's a mixture of hogsheads and butts.
Right.
So there's some butts in there. But I've got to say, Roy, my favourite cask for it, and it's not very often you come across it because you've got to wait a long time, is butts at between 15 and 18-year-old. My favourite. That's my favourite cask.
And would that be a refill? A refill butt, first fill butt?
A first fill butt, 15 to 18 years old. When it gets that time for a slow maturation. 18-year-old. That's what I think produces the best whiskey.
What you're talking about is a Christmas fireside dram, right?
That's exactly it.
Absolutely. I'm going to pose a complaint to you now, James. You had never heard of this before. This was news to your ears. Where we were on a tech check when I brought this to your attention. I'm going to try it tonight. But we're loving the new bottles. We love the kind of story behind them. We love the fact that they're quite unique. I like the aesthetic. Honestly, I think it's quite attractive. But because of this round shoulder with the kind of waterfall-inspired design at the top here, there's no glug. A lovely pop from the cork there, but I'll put this up to the mic. No glug from the bottle at all. That's the first pour. You know, normally you get that thing as you pour it. So there's quite a few people in the community has pointed that out, that suddenly we've got this really silent pour from Arran. So I think what you need to do is try and make out that that's a deliberate thing and talk about it, perhaps.
It's a deliberate thing, Roy, because you can pour your whiskey without your wife knowing about it because you don't think that.
So if you want to have a wee dram on the sly, if you're hiding it for somebody, that's how you do it, is you pour yourself a dram of Arran and nobody busts you for having it. Fantastic. Vicky Thompson is saying, thank you for the recommendation of the sherry cask Arran. It's wonderful. Vicky and I had an interaction. The sherry cask Arran is not this one. They do a cask strength version called the Bodega cask, I think it's called, or Bodega.
The Bodega, yep.
And it's a sherry matured product, non-age statement, cask strength, but it's £55 of that order. And where I would recommend that to somebody is where somebody has kind of been enjoying like a Glenfarclas 105 and wants to switch it up a bit, or somebody that used to love the Aberlour Abuna and now it's gone out, floated out of their price range now. Now that wonderful, wonderful cask strength sherry expression from Arran is available. Vicky, I'm very glad that you're enjoying it. Jason Whiskey Wise is in, saying good aquavitae and all. Thank you so much, Jason. He's saying 100 likes. Absolutely. Anybody, it does help us a lot if we get a thumbs up, of course. It's fully optional. I'm trying really hard to keep up with comments after as well. I appreciate everybody that watches on the replay. If you leave a comment after in the comments underneath, not just in the live chat, I make a promise to everybody that I'll reply to every comment that people that pick it up in the replay. It's something I'm trying very, very hard to do. So thank you. Thanks, Jason. Nice to see you. And Kevin Bryant is saying, evening, Roy, late to the vPub, sipping on a Craigellachie 13 sample. Kevin, you don't ever need to apologise for being late. It's not church, it's the pub. Don't worry. I'm going to bring in Andy now, Andy Bell. Andy, how are you, my friend? Sorry if I embarrassed you earlier by talking about how you commanded that room in Germany, but I've complimented you for it in the past. In fact, I told you at the time, well done, because I could feel that you were going to have to dig deep. But do you remember, I think you remember that tasting, we've talked about it before, yeah? Oh, it's me, it's my fault, I've got you muted. Sorry, start again. Go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say, first of all, thanks for having me on. I feel like I'm on the sort of, with the Joe Rogan of whiskey here. It's broadcasting power at its finest. No,
I mean, if you imagine, it's a very, very very, very small, very, very niche thing. So, but aye, it's as long as you're comfortable, as long as you're happy, as long as you can see and hear everybody, we can see and hear you. But we've hung out together before, but it was the Lockdown Festival, wasn't it? Yeah. Aye, you weren't on the. This is your first time in the vPub. Sorry, Andy. I should welcome you to the vPub. I thought you'd been here before.
Sorry, no. I do remember that tasting vividly. I do actually. I really enjoy that show in Frankfurt. It's kind of coming up, or it would be coming up now had we not had this disaster. But yeah, I know. I do really remember that vividly, and it's just your luck sometimes at tastings what slot you get, whether. The beginning of the day can be just as challenging as the end. People are a bit stiff and they're not quite into it. Yeah, well, sometimes they're a bit impatient, but sometimes they're just not quite ready to participate. They're not warmed up yet. So the end of the day has the opposite challenge. But yeah, no, I do remember that. And actually, I've been doing this a while now, and some of the best tastings I've ever done are when people are a wee bit lubed up and they get behind you. And it can be really good. It's a really cool feeling when the whole room is into the same. You know how it feels. You're doing the same thing. You're having a discussion with the community. Everybody's into the same topic, and it's kind of like that in microcosm when you do it with a group of folk who've had a dram. And once they're on your team, it's really great fun.
Absolutely, and I think the reason that tasting went well at that point in time is that it's all too easy for people to set into a tasting, and especially if it's a brand that they're semi-familiar with or they are very familiar with. They've bought the tasting because they're already invested, they're passionate about it. They sit down and up comes a PowerPoint presentation and oh my God, I've got to learn about the home of the brand and everything like that from scratch again. That was not what the tasting was about. I remember your presentation being very light on text. There's no verbiage there. It was imagery you used. I think there was some quite... would that be right in saying that you even included a picture of yourself as a kid or a baby in it? Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I do at the end, and that's a bit, I don't know, maybe it's a bit manipulative, but I like to get the personal touch.
For anybody that's not been at one hand.
No, it's I put one of these pictures in the end because I think I'm sure you get at this yourself, whereby whiskey is something that you feel linked inextricably to experiences in your life, and often that goes hand in hand with a place. And Arran is that place for me. I took my first steps in Whiting Bay when I was a wee boy, literally probably just slightly older than my wee boy is now. I think I was like just over a year going there when it was my first holiday, I think, when I was weeks old, and then going back in over the years, and I took my first steps there. So did my sister. So Arran is a place that we've always had in our lives, and that has become intermingled with the whiskey for me. So that's why I put it in, because it's a personal thing.
Aye, that sense of place and that sense of connection. Now, you're a young guy, Andy. What age are you? You about 30 years old or something? Or
32.
Okay, so you're not much older than Arran itself. So when that picture that you share in that presentation at the end, when you're just that little kid, I mean, what would you be, 2 or 3 years old? There was somebody somewhere in the world while that picture was getting taken, plotting a distillery in Arran.
Yeah, it was that would have been probably just 89 or probably very, very early 1990 or summer 1990. No, summer 89 it would be. And a year or two later, you got Harold Curry having this brainchild to open up the distillery. It's quite amazing.
It is amazing. I'm going to put a question to you. I've got a couple of questions here as well from the community that I'll pull in too. But I've got a question to you because I know that this is something that's close to James's heart. So what's happening with Andy there, James, is Andy's been with the company a few years now. You're getting this guy in at a young age, and you're really getting the whiskey and what's involved in whiskey under his fingernails. He's kind of got to learn it through and through. And that's something that's important to you, isn't it? That somebody actually learns the business from the ground up.
It's something that I've got to be in my bonnet about at the moment. Is that there's people coming into distilleries these days, into management inside the distilleries, who have not done the groundwork. They're coming in halfway as they've got degrees and everything else, so they come in as basically site operations managers, because the thing that seems to be happening in the industry just now is compliance. Compliance seems to be the main word that's used in the whisky industry these days, because much regulation, and I think compliance these days is beginning to overtake what he is all about. You know, is making a fantastic product, people in there that is, you know, committed and, you know, love what they're doing. I think that's what whisky is about. It's not all about compliance, although regulation is very important. I think I think that, you know, we're losing a wee bit of the sort of, you know, people being very passionate about what their, you know, what their job is and everything else. And I find that Andy has come in as a salesperson, and, you know, he's very, very passionate about it. He's gone about it. I mean, he comes to the distillery, he finds out what he's done. He's done his introductory brewing and distilling course and exam. And I think, what do you get? Did you get a good pass in that, Andy?
Credit. What did you get?
Credit, was it?
I suppose you're allowed to ask that. You're allowed to ask that question when you've got 45 years under your belt, Andy. It's interesting.
Somebody that's really committed to it.
I think what you're talking about, James, and I think it's something that I have heard before, but you don't always hear it. You're certainly not going to hear it from, let's say, the more kind of easy, accessible gateway type tastings that you might get involved in, where you're just going to hear about very broad brush things in whiskey. It's fine. But I think what you're talking about is the human element. The people have actually got their hands on creating the product, and they can somehow help add something to that whiskey or manipulate it and shape it in a way that makes it quite unique. The human element, the side of it, and at every stage. And I think that when you're making whiskey for single malt whiskey's sake, for its consumption, it's nice for you to be able to talk about that and not just be making up a nice romantic fanciful story, but actually be talking about, no, the people that are making this whiskey want it to be as good as they possibly can. They want to share it with the people that they know that they're close to. They want to take pride in it. They want to show it off and make it as good as it can possibly be. I think that's what you're kind of talking about. People that know how to mash, people who know how to run the still, people who know how to look after the warehouse at every stage of the production. Yeah.
I mean, one of the terms that are used an awful lot is master distiller. I mean, for me, the master distiller is a person who's been working in a distillery for 20, 30 years, who knows how to make very good whiskey, who's been in there and in the ground. That, to me, is what a master distiller is. Not somebody that turns up at a whiskey show and has 2 or 3 years experience, and the marketing team in the company has given him the title master distiller. I'm having a wee go here.
No, that's why you're here. I don't mind you having a wee go at all. That's really why I was excited to have you on, James, because I want to hear your take on this. I want to hear your opinion on it, because we've all got our own opinions. We're happy to share them in here. Why shouldn't you be? But it's interesting because, you know, you through your time at Bowmore, I imagine at Bowmore Distillery over there on Islay, you would have known that distillery inside out and pretty much known how to take care of pretty much every task in that distillery, right?
Yep. Yes. Yep. And as I said, Roy, when I went to Arran, that was one of the reasons I was given the job, is that I knew, you know, the plant and how to operate the plant. And even today, David is the manager at Lochranza, and Graham is down at Lagg. They don't have engineers inside. They've got, you know, if there's major, huge problems, they've got all the tiny problems like changing pumps and things like that. They can do that themselves because they know the plant, they know how it works. To me, that's what a distillery is about. It's a personal touch and knowing how you, as I said already, good distillery manager knows what his plant is capable of.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anthony Kaczynski has bought me a dram saying the 10 is definitely a hero whiskey. Thanks, James. He's talking about this hero whiskey is a concept that I've come up with, is that when you can buy a whiskey that's naturally presented, that brings a lot of engagement, that's really good, it's better than you can reasonably expect, it's widely available, and most importantly, that it's affordable. That's a hero whiskey, and I would agree with you, Anthony. I agree that the Arran 10 fits that bill perfectly. I've got a question here from Time for a Dram. Gregor, he's saying how much of his own personal journey of whiskey palate experience and what Whiskey Moments goes into how he shapes what Arran was to be. So Greg's asking how much of it is James MacTaggart's idea of whiskey, and maybe that could be versus a remit that somebody else gave you.
Yeah, I think, Roy, that's a very good question, because when when you're blending the whiskey, it basically got to be used what you think is a good whiskey. You can't say, somebody else likes a bit more spicy, somebody likes a bit more fruity. You can't do that, because you've got to basically, it's your choice what that whiskey is going to be.
Go with your own conviction.
It's very, very personal when you're blending.
Well, I have to say, this was one of my favourite whiskies of last year. I've raved about it often. I've not sipped this from the new bottle yet, but it's bringing back those memories. It's really like rich, ripe citrus, ripe, sweet oranges to me. There's lots of that kind of everything that you would expect inside a sherry matured whiskey. That's there, the fruit and things, but that kind of, it's almost like the Arran spirit, because that orange note I detect in a lot of Arran spirit, the bright, ripe, sweet citrus note. It seems like the spirit is robust enough to stand up to this really, really quite rich sherry maturation. I think it's a cracking whiskey. I think it's a great job. And for anybody that's been watching the channel for long enough will know that I'm a big fan of American oak sherry. It's just a great, great mix. Super soft, super easy drinking, super accessible. It's very full and round. Just easy drinking. I think that most people would pick that up and they wouldn't place it at 46. It behaves much softer. I think that's down to the maturity of it. But is there older stock in this?
To say the truth, I can't actually remember, but there probably will be.
There probably will be.
There'll be a slightly older stock in there.
So you're not adverse to reaching into some older stock if it matches, and to get the marriage right.
I could maybe contribute a little angle on it as well. I think when James was saying a lot of the casks that were filled back then were sherries, that is, we do know that, but what we also find is that some of those may be refills also. So where you have the really active first fills that are giving you that rich flavour and the colour and stuff, there will be an element of refill involved there, which is probably where it's retaining the fresh fruit character, if you see what I mean. So
absolutely.
There's two flavors being brought through the ages there in different manner. So you've got the more influential first fills are giving you really that punchy, sherry, round, spicy, dry, woody character, and then you've got the refills which are allowing the Arran character to be smuggled through and complementing that. So I do get where you're coming from with the juicy versus sherry thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, anybody that's had something that's fresh out of a European oak sherry cask, they're going to get that kind of, it leaves the palate often quite, the tannins can leave the palate quite dry. It really is like spice. It's like a spiced experience. Whereas that is here, but it's in the background. It's just a facet of this dram. Honestly, the spice is in check. It's quite quiet. What we've got here is a much rounder, much softer sherry experience. It's quite decadent. It's quite luscious, I would say. The people that I have recommended this to, that have bought on my recommendation, I'm very, very grateful that they've come back and said you're absolutely right. It's a lovely whiskey. I've got Cascode here. Nice to have you in, my friend. Cascode is in Australia, I think, if I'm right. And he's saying a whiskey question for James. Does he think that old school seat of the pants distillery management style he talked about is only possible in a smaller independent distillery nowadays?
I think it probably, because of the size of the big companies and the way they operate nowadays, I think probably is right there in a way that it's smaller distilleries that benefit from that type of management. Because I think that distillery managers should be seen as being the person that's producing that whiskey. I think that character should be in the whiskey. And I think that's important for the smaller distilleries. The bigger distilleries has much more, what could I say, we came to the word compliance before, the concentrate on basically making sure that the health and safety and all that sort of stuff is up to scratch. And they concentrate on that. The managers have got to concentrate on that these days. So they don't have basically the time to be spending in the distilleries, seeing that the whiskey is made properly. No, I wouldn't say properly, but seeing that the whiskey has been made to what they think.
I think he's frozen up a wee bit. No, I think that's clear, James. I think it is clear. It's that you've got free reign to make the whiskey, the best whiskey that you think you can make with the stocks that you have on hand.
Yeah.
And you don't need to necessarily be distracted with the compliance and all the other kind of distractions and things that can get in the way. And I know that you see in your past career through the changes and ownership and everything that you've seen over the years, you're not just speaking about from your perspective, you've actually got first-hand experience of being in that situation, no doubt.
I mean, Jim McEwen at one time was asked the question about, the way Bruichladdich are making the whiskey, it must, price per litre, what they're making it for must be much higher than other companies. And he said, not interested in that. They're interested in the quality of the whiskey they're making. And I think that's absolutely true. I mean, you've always got to keep an eye on, costs and what it's costing you to make the whiskey. But the number one goal is to make a good, very high quality, in the production side, a good new spirit.
Absolutely. And I think if you're pointing it to the enthusiast who's going to drink it as a neat product for single malt's sake, then surely that's the only way to go, to just make the best malt whiskey you possibly can. You've got
to make the best new spirit, and you've got to complement that by using very, very good casks and a very good wood quality.
Absolutely. Stewie Baby is in. Good to see you, Stewie. He's asking, does James have any experiments in progress that he's excited about? Is there anything that's kind of you're keeping under your hat for the minute? I know that you're going to be excited about the 25-year-old, of course, but is there anything else going on, James?
No, nothing going on, but there's a lot of thoughts going on at the moment. And Andy's in the mix there somewhere as well. There's a lot of talk going on. So we're not able to bring anything out at the moment, but watch this space. That's it, Andy.
Well, let me ask. Sorry, go ahead, Andy. Go.
I was going to say, James, something we could maybe remind them of, which there was a press release of a couple of months ago when we locked down for the COVID thing. Obviously, the distilleries were closed as well in the first instance, so both production sites were closed down. So we realised at some point they would obviously both have to come back into production. So Arran were never shy to try and mark a milestone, quite like a bit of pomp and ceremony. We filled casks over the millennium to give us the millennium casks. These sorts of things are quite, we're at home with those ideas. And something that we thought would be quite cool is, why don't we do something that we've never been able to do before, and take new spirit from Lagg and new spirit from Lochranza and marry them at spirit stage. So we did that. So we have a 50-50 marriage of Lagg spirit and Lochranza spirit was filled into various cask types, and that was just for a bit of fun. Project North and South, you could call it. But I think I did a bit of research, and I don't think that this has been done before with malt spirit, certainly not in a publicised manner. It has been done with malt and grain. When Ben Nevis had both pieces of equipment under their roof, and also when Lochside had a Lomond still, and I believe they had a grain facility there as well. They did blended at birth, as they called it, but that was grain and malt. So we're into something kind of unique as far as we know.
Well, and there's an upcoming vPub that I'm working on just now that's going to talk about blended malt whiskey, just to try and get across the message that everybody's missing a trick right now, that there's wonderful experiences to be had out there. It's wonderful that we chase our individual surgical experiences with single malts, no problem. But blended malt, really, there's an opportunity there with blended malts. When it's done well, it really can make something that's greater than some of its parts. But what you're talking about there is interesting, because you're marrying the spirit before it's whiskey. It's Arran, everything is Isle of Arran, but it's from Lochranza and Lagg. So it's a blended malt, even though it's the same company. It still has from two different distilleries.
It's absolutely, it's kind of, to an extent, it's finger in the air stuff, because you don't know what the malt of Lagg, what the single malt of Lagg will taste like. Really, we have an indication because we're already tasting the progress, but it's we don't know for certain what a single malt from Lagg will taste like. We have an excellent idea of what Lochranza does at lots of different ages and lots of different woods, but Lagg's a different kettle of fish. So yeah, we just thought it'd be an interesting experiment, and like James says, with the independent nature of the company, we decided to do that, and the next day it was done.
Absolutely. This is the wonderful thing about being that kind of, you can almost have that kind of maverick swagger about you. Just have these ideas and say, what if? Because, you know, what's the worst thing that can happen? You end up having to blend it out and create it, make it into something else. So it's wonderful to see that kind of thing happening, which I suppose is the temptation that means that you end up with so many releases, because you have that ability to get a bit whimsical, to get a bit creative. And Eric Cunliffe in Canada is saying, I'm so grateful for this vPub and special guests. Arran is setting the standards with their practices. A lifelong fanboy here. Thanks, Eric. Nice to have you in. Everyone is saying, how hard was it to hold on to the whiskey until it was 10 years old before releasing? Arran must have had faith in the product and good backing. Well, no, you did have younger releases before the 10, right? There were releases before.
I mean, there were more releases. I talked about that before, Roy. It's when Douglas Davison was trying to promote and sell whiskey. He had these wine cask finishes. He had a lot of them. But that we managed to get rid of most of them when we came to the 10-year-old. That's when we had the solid product.
Well, I think the crazy thing is, James, that what you point out is that there you had a man who's trying to get creative, to come up with something that's a bit unique and different in order to get this new whiskey that people were nervous about. I told you the story about me in the shop, looking at a bottle of Arran. At first I thought it was a blended end. Why would I touch that? Put that in the context of contemporary times today, people are going nuts. I've got whiskey here from Ardnamurchan, from Nicknean. You know, these are, Ardnamurchan is a 5-year-old. That's a mature new distillery release. The Nicknean is 3 years old. But we're really interested. We're tripping over each other. We're fighting with each other to get our hands on these new whiskies, these new experiences. The landscape is a completely different place than it was back in those days. And you kind of feel it for that guy when he's putting out those whiskies, because that you guys were doing something that was new. And people didn't have this concept of new whiskies from new distilleries back then. So I can imagine it would have been tricky. I'm glad you stuck with it. I know that it's been difficult for you over the years. I know that things are going well for you now with your expansion. But let me ask you a question. A little bird told me that Lagg only exists because you wanted to extend Lochranza and you couldn't. Is there any truth in that?
A wee bit. Let's put it that way.
that's a wee bit of truth.
What happened was we had this is a story. We had looking for the land next to Lochranza to build warehouses, and the landowner came back and said, "Yes, I'll not sell you anything, but I'll give you a 99-year lease, and also there'll be a standard yearly rent, and on top of that, there'll be a percentage of the company profits." So we decided that wasn't going to happen.
No.
So where are we going to get warehousing? So we at the south side of the island, we were offered this land in the south side of the island for warehousing, but we knew we wouldn't get any warehousing without building a distillery. So the original idea was to build a small craft distillery, but then our major shareholders and the rest of the directors decided there's no point in just doing something small. Let's plan for the future here. Let's a good sized distillery and visitor centre down there. So it was basic. That's how it came about. But at the same time, there was a lot of vision there and what was, where the company was going and what we were going to do.
Now, tell us the difference, Andy. This is probably a good question for you, actually. Tell us the difference because we know that Lochranza gave us all the whiskies that we enjoy, all the mature whiskey. It's all Lochranza, including the peated campaigns to give us things like Macri Moor. So what's the vision then? What's the difference between Lochranza and Lagg?
In terms of what product offering will be, or a production sense? In
terms of what we're going to see released from those whiskies. In the future, I mean, what's interesting, the Malt Whiskey Yearbook, just as a quick aside, I sent an email. The guy, the author of this was on the vPub a couple of weeks ago. Fantastic guy. But I wanted just to check before we went live earlier today. I said, well, what are they saying about Arran? He's probably updated the entry. And it goes from Ardmore to Auchentoshan. Arran's gone. So I go to the index at the back. Arran is gone. Ingvar's forgot to put Arran in the new Malt Whiskey Yearbook. And I'm admitting something. It's a facepalm moment on my side. There's no doubt. I sent Ingvar a email. He came back straight away and he said, Roy, it's not called Arran, it's Lochranza. Look under Lochranza. Because that's the issue that you're going to have. You've now got Lochranza in the north and Lagg in the south. So I guess that they're both going to become those things. So does that mean that this will change to Lochranza, or will this stay Arran?
No, the brand is out there now. The brand's out there now, and it's in the world as Arran, so that must be the way it stays. But Lagg will be Lagg, all under the umbrella of Isle of Arran Distillers. But I suppose when you go, James,
the official title was always Lochranza Distillery.
Yeah.
So will the word Lochranza appear anywhere on the bottle, or? It doesn't right now, I don't think.
It's on the glass. If you look around the...
you're right. It is Lochranza Distillery. It's on the glass at the top.
So we did shoehorn it. We did shoehorn it in because it is Lochranza Distillery, as James says. It always has been. If you're writing a letter, that's where you address it to. So yeah, it is Lochranza Distillery, but the brand is out as Arran now. So that way it must stay. Lagg will be Lagg, of course, and the difference in how the two kind of the vision goes is that Lochranza will always be the classic expressions that you know now, but what we'll have with Lagg is an opportunity to be more experimental with any number of aspects of the production, whether that's changing peat source from we're going to experiment with some Isla peat, possibly some from farther afield. With any luck at all, we'll get some Arran peat. Then that means we can combine it with our locally grown Arran barley and make a 100% Arran product, which hasn't appeared in the south end of the island for 150, 200 years. That'd be a real hairs in the back of the neck moment, I think. Albeit we do still produce local barley at Lochranza. We have been doing that for about 5 years now. So we've got whiskey at Lochranza that's local barley, but that will continue at Lagg. And then the idea is to just get under the skin of peat and see how we can explore that topic, because it's so much bigger than ppm. There's so much more to it than that. So that's the idea. Would you say that's fair, James?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
So what we're talking about there is that idea that you can start to establish something a bit like Highland Park does when you get a really nice peated Highland Park. It's not Isla peat. You can tell that there's something different going on there, and it's nice to have that variation, and it would be nice to see that in Arran. Just as a kind of broad brush statement there, the way I understand it is Lochranza is going to be taking care of the traditional Arran that we've come to know and love, and at Lagg, it's the majority, if not 100% of the production is going to be peated.
Yep. The stumbling block comes when we talk about Macri Moor, though, because we can't simply move the Macri Moor brand to Lagg. That's against the law. We'd have to take the Macri Moor brand out of circulation for 10 years and before we could relaunch it as a Lagg product. So yeah, we have to work with the peated stocks we have at Lochranza for the time being, and then we'll see what happens to Macri Moor.
Okay, so it might be that we see another creation coming from Lagg. So maybe Macrimur might survive, might not. I guess it's something that you have to see as time goes.
I would think in the medium term, the Macrimur will be a Lochranza product, and then when it's finished, it's finished. And what will be from Lagg will be Lagg in its own right.
Okay, picking up from where Macrimur stepped up. Now you started to talk a wee bit there about Arran barley. Interesting. Dave, Precarious Dave in Patreon says Arran once experimented with beer barley. Are there any future plans to experiment with barley or perhaps even yeast strains? So we talked about peat. We've talked about messing around with potentially ppm. I don't know. But what about barley strains and yeast? James, do you see much room for experimentation, for development through using different yeast strains? I know that I've tasted some Loch Lomond wine yeast product that was wonderful, very fruity. The only thing that was changed there was the yeast. And perhaps also, if it's not too loaded a question, to ask the same about different barley strains. And is there any chance that you'll still be using beer barley, for example?
No, we won't be going back to beer barley, no. But the only thing we're experimenting with barley is the Arran grown barley itself. So we're looking forward. We've been 5 or 6 years. It won't be long till we're bringing out a product that is going to be, spirit produced with Arran barley. The yeast, we might experiment with yeast in the future. We haven't done it. We've been building up our brand, so basically we haven't been experimenting with it. It's very dangerous for. In 1995, when the distillery started, there was a spirit produced and it's dangerous to try and change that spirit. And if you're going to start changing the yeast, you change the spirit. So there's been no experimenting with yeast over the years because we want to create a good solid new make spirit. But as time goes by and maybe we've got time to do it, it's something we'll probably look at in the future. It's something that Andy has raised already. Andy has asked that question, and it's something that in the future we might find the time to do. But at the moment, we don't have basically the time to experiment. Not with yeast.
Fantastic, but it's because again you can leverage the fact that you are independent to make up your own mind based on mood, motivation, moment, all that kind of things. Interesting, but definitely that's your answer, Dave. He's sitting on a couple of bottles of beer barley Arran that you picked up, and he's probably wondering whether he should open them and drink them or keep them for a wee while to flip them a wee bit later. I think that's the reason for his question.
That's one of my favourite all-time. Never mind Arran. That's one of my favourite the 10-year-old green box cask strength beer barley is just out of this world. It's so earthy, farmyard, hay bales, fruity, apple pie. Get those open and get them drunk because they're amazing. Well,
there you go, Dave. If you're in tonight, you've heard it from Andy directly. If you're not in tonight, I'm going to drop by your house tomorrow and make you a ridiculous offer for your 10-year-old cask strength. He's got one of each. He's got the 46 and he's got the cask strength as well. Alan McLaughlin is saying it's a funny one with Arran. I was talking to my dad recently after I'd been in the Arran tasting. He replied with, "Isn't Arran that cheap stuff that doesn't taste very good?" I'm not sure where that opinion comes from, and I can't wait to prove him wrong. Now, I have to say that I think that that's one of the things that you rely on us for, is because, people see that brand that they don't recognize. And I have to say, Isle of Arran does sound a wee bit like it could be a blend or something like that. And I think that when people come to a brand that they don't know, that they don't recognize, they step gingerly towards it. They're not sure. And that kind of sense of not being sure, not having a solid recommendation or any reassurance that it is already a brilliant product, can actually detract a wee bit from the experience. And that's kind of what we're about here. That's what we're about as a community. When we see this product that's put out there at a good price, natural presentation, just the way we like it, and it's got good quality engagement, we shout about it from the rooftops. And like Alan's going to do, he's going to evangelize to his dad and everybody and talk about the fact that, look, just because this isn't a Macallan, you don't recognize, it's not a Glenfiddich, it's not one of the brands that you recognize. but this is special whiskey. Look at this presentation. Look at what it says on the label about the presentation of this whiskey. Look at the ABV. Understand what this is about. And so I think that is something. Do you rely heavily on the enthusiast community, that festival community? How do you get the word out there?
Is that one for me?
I think that's one for you, Andy, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's interesting when you're saying the gentleman commenting is referencing
Alan,
his dad. Yeah, Alan's referencing his dad. How do we at Arran get to the point where somebody's saying, "Oh, that's my dad's favourite dram"? Because then the brand is entrenched, and that's when you've proved yourself. If that's your grandpa's favourite dram, then you've done it. We're a wee while away just by how old we are, but that's the goal. But yeah, you're right. The enthusiast community has been something that has it's been invaluable for us in terms of spreading the word of what Arran's all about, and that's been part of our modus operandi in building the brand, is being out in the markets and speaking to people. You've seen it firsthand, Roy. The whiskey shows are massive, but even back in the days where they weren't quite so massive, we were still there. Because even though we're a young distillery, we were still in at the genesis of what you might call whiskey shows. Just when those things were starting to become an event. Arran was present, albeit with very young whiskey, but we were there, and that has been something that my colleagues and I and my predecessors have always been involved in, is speaking directly to the consumers and trying to foster this connection of personal touch between the brand, James, the distillery guys, and the master blender, and the whiskey itself. It's a personal thing that we've always thrived on, and yes, the enthusiast community is definitely one we appeal to.
I have to say, one of the crucial things, one of the things to me, one of the reasons I got into Arran, and obviously this year, 2020 being the exception, it's a disaster right now for the events that you're talking about, for our tastings and things. Were the guys here at Good Spirits Company. They're the guys that finally got me picking up Arran and connecting with it. My friend, the Whiskey Rev, he was a fan of Arran before I was. He was buying it. The two of us drinking it together. And again, so you've got that channel through the specialist retailers people always talk about, and I'd like to kind of remind people, that it's great to use the convenience of the online services. It's wonderful. It's really good. Go right ahead and do that. But you know what? Take a wee bit of time. Because the extra layers of insight, knowledge, recommendations that you can build up through these guys, not just the Good Spirits Company in Glasgow, but any of these independent retailers, because it's people like that put me in touch with Arran, that led me to feel comfortable about approaching Arran at festivals and things like that. And when these guys are talking about it, that it might be a brand that you don't really know. Everybody knows Arran now, obviously, in my community. But if it's a brand that you don't really know, you feel safe that you can spend your money and know that you're going to get a good experience.
I would add one thing to that we're very lucky to have such a strong team at the visitor centre as well. Our visitor experience is absolutely amazing. And James, what was the visitor numbers? Can you remember? It's over 110,000 anyway. When we're operating
in Lochranza it was about 120,000 in Lochranza alone. That's before everything shut down, basically. That's always good.
So that's the single biggest footfall in any distillery in Scotland. It's incredible. It's incredible, and I know that you've got that tourist draw on the island of Arran already. So you've got the folk coming onto the island, and that must give you a really good position to be able to grab these people that are going to a distillery for the first time potentially, and kind of talk to them about what whiskey is. And probably you've enjoyed seeing that conversion, that you evangelizing to these people to try the whiskey for the first time and watching them go, wow, is this what whiskey can be? But that's right, well over 100,000. You're saying 120,000 visitors. That's fantastic, guys. That's a great job. Chris Malloy, I've got a fan in Chris Malloy. He's a patron from me as well. He said, I came across Arran over a decade ago when I was a Scotch Padawan. I'd never heard of them, but the 10 was selling for $36. It was 46%, and it was unchill filtered natural colour. Things I was being told were signs of quality by a bonnet-wearing Scotsman on YouTube. He's obviously making reference to our friend Ralphie there. Had recently taken a liking to, so I picked up a bottle and then another and another. Menno in Belgium is saying, what I like about Arran is, by which I mean I get to grow up with them on my whiskey journey. This is a wee bit like what we were talking about earlier, Andy. He said, I think the old 10-year-old was one of the first I'd tried when I was branching out from my beloved peat monsters. I'll fully admit that at the time, it didn't really do much for me, but now, close to a decade later, I've come back time and again and watched them evolve and grow, much like my own palate. I feel the same way. I feel like I have witnessed in real time the improvement in the whiskies from Arran, the improvement in the presentation, the improvement in the consistency, the reliability, which has got so much to say about the team there, about you, James, of course, but also perhaps how the stock's been managed and that depth of stock and all those wonderful things that come with the distillery and the production being that wee bit mature. Have you seen it change over the years yourself? James?
Yeah, I have. I mean, when the whole thing has changed. When I went to Ireland, there was the two boys that worked in the warehouse were saying to me, you know, there's no whiskey moving out of here. Where's all the sales going? There doesn't seem to be any sales. Now we've got blinking lorries going out there nearly every week, and my job is an awful lot harder to basically produce the spirit for the bottlings that are required at the moment.
Because there's more and more.
Even this year with everything that's happened recently, this is going to be the best year we've ever had. So Arran has picked up hugely, and I think Andy will tell you that the sales this year, the brand sales have grown, you know, an awful lot. Andy, what's the percentage of sales, brand sales? You know, there's been a big growth in it.
Yeah, we're over in the key markets. We're over 25-26% up on our budget. Never mind up on last year. So it's been very good. I think there's probably compound factors influencing that. For one, the rebrand will be causing a lot of excitement in the markets because people want to re-engage with Arran because of that fact. That's natural. But then we have obviously the I suppose the silver lining for us is the fact that we've had to lock down is that people are consuming whiskey at home, and sadly our gain is gin and rum's loss. So I think when you consider the categories we're up against, whiskey is the winner there, and I think we've benefited from that. There's no on-trade consumption really this year the same way as there would normally be, so people aren't drinking in bars. In a lot of our markets, we do very well in the specialist retailers, and I believe it or not, in even some slightly larger scale retailers in certain markets. So those are channels that have actually remained open and very, very buoyant. So yeah, it's kind of just worked out for us, I suppose, this year in lots of ways.
It's one of the things I'm grateful of as well, that despite all the challenges we've seen, technology have afforded us the medium to be able to get together still and do it to an extent. It's not ideal, it's not a replacement, but it's an okay substitute, and we can still enjoy our drams at home, and we can still have that kind of sense of connectedness through the whiskey and things like that. So I do agree with you, and it's an interesting point that you make, that it's a kind of, maybe to an extent rum, but certainly gin's loss, because that is much more of something that you're going to get prepared and served to you in a bar environment, whereas whiskey you're happy to pour on your own at home. Everyone has asked a question. Oh no, I did answer everyone's question. It's I'm looking at Thirsty Steve. Arran being the oldest of the new distilleries, what is their thoughts on the new distilleries? Any shining stars you recognise? Now, unfortunately, guys, this is something that's par for the course on the vPub. I ask you openly, as passionate whiskey fans, to celebrate your peers out there in the market as well. So what other things have caught your eye? What other things do you enjoy? I'll pitch that to Andy first. I think from Thirsty Steve's perspective, he's kind of asking about new distilleries, but I'll open it up if you're struggling there. Any kind of other products that you enjoy?
Oh no, wouldn't struggle. It's new distilleries. I've got a very personal affinity to Kingsbarns. My best pal from school is the distiller there, the distillery manager Peter. That's my buddy, and I do think
you've pinched my answer to that question.
Sorry. Well, I'm glad he's getting the McTaggart endorsement as well. Then, but what Peter's doing there for a young guy to come in and take the reins, and he was in there at the commissioning phase and helping to get that place up and running. So James's comment about knowing your plant inside out, well, Peter is in that position, and for a young guy, that's remarkable. And the whiskey he's making there, he was a brewer before, and he's taken knowledge of brewing into the distillery, and he mixes, not to go back to the yeast discussion, but he mixes yeast strains, and the amount of fruity characters they get from their spirits, amazing. I wouldn't necessarily, well, okay, if we're talking new, I suppose Kilchoman is still new, and I really love what they're doing with the whole farm barley to bottle thing. They're now hand cutting their peat, which is quite an undertaking, albeit they don't use very much of it. It's like what I think James told me, it's like a wheelbarrow and a half per malting. They're not using a whole lot of it, but it's still nice that they do it. I don't know. Other ones, I've tasted some Daft Mill recently, which has blown my socks off. I think that's fabulous. Really, really nice stuff, and very.
Don't
very
be recommending
honest.
Daft Mill. Nobody can get the stuff.
Sorry, I know, but it's very.
Yeah.
If you want an honest presentation of a whiskey, that's about as honest as it comes. I think that's really nicely done.
So did Andy steal all your answers for you there, James?
I think. Let me ask. Well, what I've got to say, Roy, is Andy mentioned Kilchoman there. Kilchoman, anybody starting up a distillery should take that lesson from Kilchoman, because they went in there and they brought great experience in Jim Swan into that. Jim Swan was an advisor to Anthony Wills at the very beginning. And Jim made sure that the wood policy was solid from the very, very beginning. And they spent good quality, a lot of money on good quality wood. So they were very, very well advised from the very beginning, and that's how they became. That's how they've got good success now, and they went about it the right way, and that's getting the right advice from the very beginning. And I'm not sure everybody did that.
Absolutely. I also noticed, James, that you were having a wee sip from a glass there. What's in your glass? What are you drinking tonight?
Well, you see, I don't know whether you can see that.
Carry on.
Oh, okay. That looks like a wee bottle of the Devil's Share that you've pinched.
That's the batting of the 25-year-old, and that's what I'm drinking.
Oh, am I allowed to say this, Andy? Am I allowed to?
Well, it looks like you are.
Andy, I want to say thanks to you, because you dropped. You're a local Glasgow resident. You're not far from me. So Andy dropped off a wee gift. He dropped off the Arran malt. This is a book. Detailing the history of Arran, and it goes right back. It goes back about the family. It goes back about the vet. I've only been able to scan the book. Lots of fantastic, fascinating pictures and things in it as well. Talking about the island, talking about whiskey, talking about the challenges that they had. My goodness, great book there by Neil Wilson. But when he dropped that book off, he also dropped off something that was a real treat, and I've only taken a wee sip of this. James, I think you and I could potentially enjoy the same dram together then.
Have you got a sample of that as well?
Well, I think so. This is Arran malt. He's written almost 25-year-old cask sample, at 51.6%. So I think this is at the marriage ABV then, before it's been diluted for bottling strength, right?
Well, mine is 50.6, so yours is slightly different to mine. Right.
Okay. Well, maybe this was just thrown a bit earlier. So 50.6, that one.
Yep.
Well, this is by far the oldest Arran I've ever had in a glass in front of me.
That is the oldest Arran.
That is literally the oldest Arran that there has been in existence. What a privilege to have this. It was nice of you to drop that off, Andy. Thank you so much.
No problem at all.
Listen, I've already had a wee sip. I already kind of fed back to Andy that it was quite amazing. And it is. And what's amazing about it is that there's on the nose, you know right away there's maturity there, there's depth. It's got there's a fustiness to this. I know that that's a Scottish word, but there's that kind of dank suggestion of of maturity, that kind of warehouse dunnage type note that you get.
The finish reminds me of number 1 Malts and Bowmore.
Malts and Bowmore. Well, I have to say as well that there's no when you're kind of looking for fruit and things, you're often thinking about casks, what kind of cask it could come from, but there's nothing obvious. There's quite a marriage here. There's a fair mix of casks, I would guess, in here. It's not obvious in any direction. But
initially I get licorice in the nose. Are you getting licorice in the nose, Roy?
You don't have any right to have a whiskey as good as that, because this is drawn from stocks back from the days when theoretically you didn't have a clue what you were doing. And that is fantastic. That is lights out, fantastic, beautiful, beautiful, well-crafted whiskey. Absolutely communicative from the first sip. The spice is just so... The development through the finish is just that really, really gentle spice. There's no jaggedness there. It's just that nice kind of grip on the palate. It's got the maturity. There's no jagged edges. There's still a bit of vibrance there, but it's just a lovely spice. The lovely long finish. So when you're talking about the Bowmore thing, James, you're probably talking about fruit, because there's the tropical element that's in there as well.
Yeah.
No, it's bizarre that, when I go into Arran, I'm kind of looking for that orangey thing. Okay, it's there a wee bit now. When you mention licorice, just by the power of suggestion, I'm getting that kind of licorice, almost like fennel seeds, or what's those sweeties called? Those medicinal sweets, Fisherman's Friends, is it?
I
don't know if that's the sweet bit, but it is. It's kind of like a licorice thing. What a terrific... I was going to give half of this away, but I don't think I'm going to bother. I was going to give some of this away.
I've got a bigger bottle than you, Roy.
You have a wee bit more, but I suppose that's the privilege of the job. That's a treat. That's a treat that such a thing exists, honestly, and it's a treat that it exists, and it's that good. Listen, I understand. I appreciate how light your stocks must be of that age, that maturity. You can't have a lot of this stuff kicking around. How many bottles of this is released, Andy? Or released?
Oh no, you're asking. It's something. It's
3,000.
It's something like 500 cases or something like that worldwide.
Right, and that's globally.
3,000 bottles.
Yeah,
3,000 globally. Jimmy Legg is saying, Aquavita, anybody who enjoys a whiskey that much shouldn't drink it. That's right, Jimmy. You savour it, sip by precious sip, drop by drop. Reb Mordecai is saying, Reb's in, good to see you, Reb. He's saying, visited Arran on the 3rd of November 2019. Peter made me very welcome. Spent an hour chatting with him, as well as at Barrel Reserve. I bought a wonderful 11-year-old bourbon cask, and he hopes to be back in 2021. He's saying, please God. Absolutely, Reb. You feel the same way as the rest of us. Graham Fraser is saying, as well as Neil Wilson's Arran Distillery book, I can recommend Gregor Adamson's whiskey, history book, Arran Water. Nice recommendation, Graham.
Yep, that's
very good.
You'll find a lot of quotations from Gregor's dissertation in the book you've got there, Roy.
Okay.
So
because the reason I'm going to enjoy this book is it's not like, just a presentation about here's Arran whiskey and this is all about. This is actually a Blood, Sweat and Tears publication. It goes back to the history, it goes back to how the thing was born, the challenges. It goes right back to the Second World War. It's got pictures in there about the people behind the distillery as well. A great book. I know I'm going to enjoy that. I just want to plug another book, completely off topic, from one of the big producers as well, but I'm a huge fan of whiskey history, and I think that this book is going to give us a decent glimpse of that as well. This is the long stride. This has been actually written by Nick Morgan from Diageo, but this is a history of Johnnie Walker. And I think what I'm hoping to get out of this book is that idea that how we all talk about, we're all in our blend bubble, our blend world right now. Sorry, our single malt bubble and world right now, but we've got so much of that to thank blends for. You know, blends really created the whole whiskey as a concept, and you know, people think that malt whiskey has been around forever, and it has, but people haven't been enjoying it like we do in a modern time. There has never been the choice, there's never been the variation, there's never been the availability like we have today. And it's when you read books like that and the history of it that you realise just how privileged we are in modern times. Jacqueline has sent me something. So that's at Arran Whiskey. Jackie, she's saying that she loves this comment. Those pickup in sales just rings true to the value and quality of their product. Value versus quality is key, and they've nailed it. Absolutely, I would agree. And everyone is saying, how does James Arran measure success as a distiller? There's a loaded question for you, James. How would you measure your own success as a distiller? Because you didn't make this whiskey, you've put it together, but I guess as a distiller.
I think, I mean, every blender can only work with the stock that he's got and the casks that he's got. And I've been very lucky that part of the reason there was an awful lot of hogsheads, and that at the very beginning, Harold Curry's favourite drink was a Macallan, and he wanted to produce a whiskey similar to Macallan, and that's why the distillers are shaped the way that they are, much smaller, of course, but they used basically second, third fill hogsheads at the time because they didn't have the financial backup to buy fresh sherry hogsheads. So, I mean, fresh sherry hogsheads are very, very good. They're very good at giving you a quick colour, etc. But in my opinion, the best maturation is second fill sherry hogsheads. That's when you're getting the proper wood effect. You're getting everything out of the wood. Then you're not just getting the big sherry hit.
And you're probably afforded the luxury of being able to leave the spirit to lie in the cask for longer as well, without the cask dominating, I would guess.
Yeah.
So that's your favourite style then, a second fill. A
second fill sherry hogshead, and then Andy's just filled one for himself. He's bought one that's when it's and for what is it? The 18-year-old, is it?
Yeah. Well, when I just purchased a refill hogshead for my wee boy, so when he's 18, he can do what he wants with that.
Magic.
But that's on James's advice. I've learned a lot from James over the past 7 years, and there was only one style of cask I was going to buy for him.
Superb. And I have this kind of romantic idea that I talk about a lot in the vPub, that we like to find that balance. There's a vPub coming up, maybe next week, I hope, where Roddy and I are going to get together and talk about spirit versus cask, and that idea that we can have that lovely influence that we get from whatever our preferred cask is, but it's not so overpowering that we've suddenly lost that kind of boldness or the fruit or whatever it is that's intact in the spirit, the actual distillate itself. There's still a bit of balance. But if the cask is also second fill, as you say, James, or something that's not super active, it's not so powerful, it can be left there for long enough so that the environment gets to have a bit of a voice as well. So maybe that's where we get this lovely, welcoming, kind of dunnage, dusty, fusty, old. Anybody that's ever been in Scotland and walked into an old, cold, damp warehouse to have a dram, the glass that you're holding in your hand is freezing. The whiskey, the liquid itself is cold. It shouldn't behave and communicate the way that it does with you, but it does. And this kind of gives you glimpses of that. Just on the nose, it gives you that kind of ever so slightly distant dustiness. Quite amazing. I know it's quite a romantic thing, that thing about the environment, but I actually think it does. And even if it's only something that exists in your own mind, it's still real, and you taste it, and it's part of the experience. Gavin Roy is saying Aquavita. These two guys are so honest, brilliant. This is what I'm trying to talk about. Is when you have that independent thing, it bears that you can taste it in the whiskey. It's there in the product at the end of the day. And then you go back and you speak to the people that's responsible for putting it together. There's the people that are responsible for telling the story, like Andy does. You find that there's passion and honesty and integrity behind it as well. And I think it's one of the reasons that I wanted to celebrate you guys turning 25, because of the personal experiences I've had with it too. Wonderful stuff. I've got one more comment from Tom Verbruggen. That's Tombular Bells. He's in the comments. He's over in Belgium, I think, Tom, if I remember well. He's saying, bought the Sherry Bomb, the Bodega, last summer. Indeed, a great competitor for the Abuna. A stunning dram for a very good price. I also like their Macri Moor range. Is the production of Macri Moor going to the Lagg Distillery? I think probably, Tom, we covered that with Andy's response that aye, but they can't call it Macri Moor. So there's going to be some developments in the future. But the point is that you're going to be committed to that style. I know the one that you arranged for me to get my hands on after the Lockdown Festival, Andy, was the Fingal's Cut. I noticed that's back in stock again. Amazing. It's a very specific type of the Macri Moor, the Fingal's Cut, the sherry cask, isn't it?
That's right. But it's important to draw the distinction that when we are releasing spirit as whiskey from Lagg, it won't bear a hell of a lot of resemblance to Lochranza spirit. It's its own animal, if you know what I mean. So Macri Moor will always be a Lochranza thing. It has to be. It's Lochranza spirit after all. But yeah, Lagg will, although it will be producing very heavily peated spirit, it will be existing in its own merit, and we won't be propped up by Macri Moor there. That's its own. You know, it will stand on its own 2 feet as a brand.
I've just got to say that we've still got a lot of stock of Macri Moor. So Macri Moor is not going to disappear in the next year or two. Macri Moor will be there for a couple of years yet.
Good, and I think a lot of people have found a product that they really enjoy there, because a lot of people are looking to explore peat and peaty whiskies, but you know, they want to step off the island of Islay from time to time. And again, one of the symptoms of today's kind of malt whiskey boom is the fact that we do have all this kind of exciting variation everywhere. You can get a peated whiskey from the lowlands, from Speyside, from the Highlands, from the islands, from Campbelltown. You can get peated whiskey from everywhere, and it's great days. I think before I let you off the hook, James, I'm going to ask you probably the single most loaded question I was asked from the community, and it is a big deal. You're very much part of the problem. You don't mind if I hit you with this, do you? Something that is on my mind to ask most of the people that come on. Andy and I touched on it ever so slightly this week when we were talking that, you know, for the last decade or more, the whole whiskey industry in Scotland, if we just speak about Scotland, it's true, globally it's happening, is booming. Capacity is more than it's ever been in the past by a huge amount. Glenfiddich, 20 million litres, Glenlivet, 20 million litres, Macallan, 15 million litres, 10 million litres at Roseisle, 10 million litres at Dilmunich, Pernod Ricard and Diageo, for those two distilleries. Plus, we've got all of these new distilleries. Every month, it seems we pick up. We've just heard last month about Wolf Craig and Stirling. Not a small project, a decent-sized project. Again, another new distillery. Where's it all going to end up, James? Because you're part of the problem yourself. You've done well at Lochranza. You've now got Lagg going on there. Now, I know that potentially you'll balance the capacity or let's say the production a wee bit there. Where's it going? What's going to happen? Is there a market for all of this whiskey going forward? His internet connection stops. He didn't want to answer that.
Hang up.
We've gone in and out here.
He's back now. Sorry.
You know, the big companies are planning, you know, hoping that these Asia and India and all these markets are going to open up. And that's what the stock's been laid down for. But whether they will or not, that is a big question. They haven't opened up, and I'm not quite sure whether they will, you know, in the foreseeable future. So it's interesting, and basically that's why we're ramping up slowly, but we're ramping up in an angle that, not a steep angle, a very slow angle. We'll be doing 850,000 litres this year, but we're going up to 1 million next year. We're doing the two sites. but it's a slow, gradual, slow increase. Because we're not going to go straight up. We're not going to go into, a huge increase. So that's the way we see it. We see it as being a very gradual increase in sales for us. The big companies, I'm not sure whether they're hoping that these markets are going to go up, but it's doubtful whether they are. That's what I think on it. And if they don't open up, there will be a huge whisky loss. And some of the older people in the whisky industry think that is going to happen.
And I think that, people that have had their experience 45 years in whisky, you've been through it, James, you've seen what's happened in the past. I can imagine that you would want to continue just doing things with a bit more of a canny hand and head and have much more kind of slow, steady, organic growth. But honestly, the way I always kind of sign off with this kind of situation is that for the drinker, for the enthusiast, for the people that's just enjoying drinking the liquid that we have on hand, we can be a wee bit ambivalent to what happens in the industry because there's always going to be lots of product out there for us to enjoy. And if there's lots and lots of maturing stock out there now that's going to become available, however shape in the future, surely it's good news for us, and hopefully it means that the prices means it still stays accessible to the enthusiast, and that there's lots of depth of stock there to bring good whisky experiences in the future. We hope. If there are people like James MacTaggart involved, if there are producers like Arran doing the things that you guys have been bringing us over the last 5-10 more years, that would be a wonderful thing to look forward to. James, I'm going to raise my wee glass, and I'm going to ask Andy if he's staying for our quiz tonight. I think you're threatening to stay and hang out with us.
I'll hang about.
But I'm going to have a heartfelt thank you to James MacTaggart. To say, honestly, thank you for everything that's come out of Arran. Thank you for your servicing us as enthusiasts with the natural presentation, with keeping the pricing and the ranges realistic and accessible, for keeping the transparency the way that you do, and bringing products that we do genuinely want to engage in, and putting guys like Andy in place, honestly, that will take the criticism and the difficult, crunchy, awkward questions and will endear the brand to us even better, even more in the future as well. It's a privilege to have had you come on. I know that this isn't a realm that you would normally come into, James, so I'm very, very grateful to have been able to welcome you into the vPub tonight. I thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I know that the folk in the community has.
Thank you for having us, Roy.
And what I'll do, James,
I'm sure Andy's enjoyed it as well.
Good. I'll encourage everybody to leave comments and feedback for James in the comment section under the video. And when I have a debrief with Jackie or whoever tomorrow, next week or whatever, I can point James to the comments. He can get that feedback, and Jackie, Andy, and the team can respond to any questions, comments, or feedback that you have. Good. So I'll raise this wee glass of 25-year-old. What a treat. Thanks, Andy. Thank you for this. And I'll say to James, thank you so much, my friend, for hanging out with us this evening. It's been a pleasure to have you in, and I wish you all the very best with Arran going forward.
Thank you,
James.
Roy. Yes,
cheers.
Thank you.
Wonderful stuff, Andy. Thank you for taking me on with my invitation. I'm glad that you did reach out to James, and I'm glad that he was happy to come on. It's not very often that we get the access to the people that make the whiskey. I love it when we do. I love it when they're comfortable to step into this environment. But I especially love it when you just get that just kind of no messing, candid, honest kind of take on it. And every word betrays his 45 years, right? He's seen it all. He's kind of done it all. So you're going to hang around with us till the quiz, right?
I'll stick about.
Okay. Anybody, Jackie in the background, James in the background, you're welcome to stay here as long as you want. It's only Andy that's going to be live for the we're going to chuck Andy under the wheels of the whiskey bus for the vPub quiz at the end. I'll jump into the comments. Floyd Rodriguez is saying, thank you, James, Andy, and Jacqueline. Cheers. Many thanks indeed to Arran. Arran Whiskey, that's from Akshay. Thank you, Akshay. Everyone is saying thanks for the visit, much appreciated. Daniel Vermas is saying a big shout out for Mr. James. All the barflies are very, very grateful. So, and I knew that it would. Helen is saying Brilliant guest again, Roy. Thanks to James. Thank you all very, very much for joining and hanging out with us till the end. We're going to do a wee quiz, how we get on for time. Oh my goodness. I thought I was doing all right for time. It's the vPub. We always kind of run over a wee bit, as long as I'm not keeping you up too late. There's 10 questions, very Arran focused. This is going to be a walk in the park for you, Andy. Most of the questions here tonight are going to be looking at Arran and kind of celebrating that 25 years theme. So you should be able to do okay. But if you don't want to share your score, it's fully optional. You don't have to. You probably get a reduction in your pay packet if you do poorly. And it's all multiple choice, so you're welcome to stay. Everybody welcome to stay for the quiz and participate in the quiz at the end. It's just there for a bit of fun, and with it being multiple choice, everybody's got a chance of getting 33% chance, right? Let's pull this in, pull the share screen in. Okay, Andy, you strapping in? You ready for this?
All right, am I the sole contestant here? I'm just getting thrown to the lions.
No, you're going to find that you're going to discover a couple of things. One of the things is that the barflies in the lounge here are super knowledgeable. I predict that they're going to know more about your product than you do.
I have no doubt.
Yep, and I know you've got first-hand experience of that from the festivals. I'm going to put a cover on this 25-year-old because I'm just muscle memory reaching for it. It's utterly gorgeous. And I'm going to focus more on the bothy that I started off with and the Arran 18-year-old as we go through this quiz.
Okay.
Good luck, buddy. Good luck to everybody that's participating in. We'll get these questions done through as quick as we can. I appreciate that I'm going on a wee bit again. But I enjoyed it tonight. Very much enjoyed it. Question 1. James MacTaggart, Arran's production director, hails from Islay, but what is his middle name? Nice, easy one for everybody to start off with. Easy because this will be well known, but it's also been a question that I've had in the quiz before. Andy, don't say it out loud. I'll ask you directly later on.
All
is
right,
it A, Islay, B, Arran, or C, Lewis? What's James MacTaggart's middle name? A, Islay, B, Arran, C, Lewis. Pull up the chat here so I can see. Now, I've been getting a lot of let's say criticism recently for the quiz questions being too hard. So I think I'm going soft on a lot of these questions tonight, and we'll wait to see how it bears out. Gregor McQuee from Oregon's given us a Taggart reference from the 1980s. There's been a murder.
There's been a corpse. There's been a murder.
Yeah, there's been a murder. That's right. A Scottish crime series from the 80s and 90s. This is splitting the room a wee bit. Some people are thinking that it might actually be something else. I can say that Jamie Brown, Dancing Midgie Glenn, Danny McKinley, Che Francis, Odd Johan Lundberg, good to see you. Johan, good to have you in. Alan McLaughlin, Chuck Maltminion, Richie Z, Chris A, Ewan Walker, and Robert Fredrickson, as many others seem to think that it's what? What is it, Andy?
The answer is Islay.
Islay. James Islay MacTaggart, which I think is just a fantastic name. Question 2. In the early 18th century, Arran distillate was as highly prized to some as Glenlivet. But what was it known as? This is less, if you know it, I guess, but it's less easy, I think. But there was a time that this was prized. The liquid that they made on that island was so prized and that was known as something specific. Was it A, island livet, B, Arran water, or C, Western gold? What was the liquid that was made often illicitly? Let's be honest, Andy, right? It would have not always come from the established distilleries. It would have potentially been illicit.
More than likely.
But what was it known as? Island livet, Arran water, or Western gold? Fraser Thistle admits that he's guessing. Blair Stevenson thinks it's Western gold. Robert Fredrickson as well. Donald Rance thinks it could be Arran water. Andy, what was it known as?
The Arran water. Harking towards how easy it was to drink, that kind of tells you a bit, kind of something about the whiskey of the age. It wasn't really a very pleasant thing to drink back then, whiskey. And if something was referred to as water, it was very, very easy to drink. So prized for that reason.
Absolutely. It was known as Arran water. Now, if you'd have been listening, Whiskey Folk, Barflies, it did come up when we were talking about book recommendations a wee bit earlier in the stream. There was talk of the Arran water. So if you answer B, give yourself a point. We jump into question 3. What wildlife has, from time to time, prevented or delayed construction works at Lochranza Distillery? Wildlife has got in the way of things out at Lochranza. And I'm just going to ask you, what wildlife was that? Was it A, sea otters, B, golden eagles, or C, red deer? When I was putting this question together, Andy, I was mindful of the fact that depending on insider knowledge, it could be all of the above.
You forgot D, the mating badgers. No,
Mating badgers. Oh. Is that was genuinely a thing?
No.
This is a popular one. It's the chat has lit up. Absolutely everybody knows, and in fact, I think you still commemorate it on your labelling, don't you?
Had to be there.
We have a pair of golden eagles. What's the story there then? Was it nesting eagles? Was it, how long did it?
Yeah, up in the hills behind the distillery site, there is a nesting pair, and I guess over the years it's been different nesting pairs as time's moved on generationally. But there is a site there which has always played host to nesting pairs, and the story goes that when the distillery was being constructed, that the kind of bad luck just coincided with nesting season, and that's exactly what they started to do. And you know, it's a protected species, so you have to kind of not do anything to disturb them when they're doing the most important job. And so that halted construction for a while we let the eagles get on with producing
whatever they had to do.
So that's it. Yeah, their telly was broken.
Precarious Dave thinks that he thinks it might even still be the same pair. Yeah, I think the eagles do. They do live
a long time.
Years.
Actually, I don't know what it is about the time of the year of the festival. Well, the time of year of the festival is always the distillery's birthday, so 29th of June. But it seems to be a very common thing that they'll give you a fly past during the festival. And I've seen them numerous times on festival weekend, circling above the car park. It's quite amazing.
That's a treat in itself. Absolutely.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
If you don't enjoy the whiskey, at least enjoy the eagles coming by. Superb. It's magical when you see an eagle. It's magical. Question 4. Which of these distilleries was, until 2008, a stablemate of Ardbeg? Going to be a bit off-piste here, Andy. See how you're doing with your peers. But which of these 3 distilleries was, at one point, up until 2008, a stablemate of Isla's Ardbeg? Was it A, Glenglassaugh, B, Glengoyne, or C, Glenmurray? Daniel Vermaas is also agreeing on the concept that it would be the same pair. And how many releases have the Eagles had? I don't know if James is talking about the band. Whiskey Bond Mark is saying he blew it after question 1, made an arse of it. Stick with it, Mark. 5 out of 10 is the pass mark. Don't worry. It's way too early in the game. Maybe you can pull it together on the back 9. Do you know this one, Andy? Just give me a nod right now. You do. You know this one.
I think so, yeah.
Lindsay Oman is saying, I once came home to see an eagle in my driveway. My cat was stalking it. The cat was about a third the size of the eagle. Wishful thinking. Maybe the eagle was stalking the cat. The cat just knew. Lindsay, where are you? I'm trying to remember where you are in the world. What kind of eagle would it have been if sitting in your driveway? I think you're in the States, if I remember well. Go ahead, Andy. What do you think? Who was a stablemate of...
I reckon it's Glenmurray.
It was indeed Glenmurray. Famously, it was a kind of ignored child, the ignored sibling, and under Lamartine Case, they've gone on to much greater things. And I think it's the right thing because it let Glenmorangie focus on Glenmorangie and Ardbeg, and they've done wonders with those as well. Yep. Dancing Midges on Full House, 4 out of 4 so far, as well as Danny McKinley. And Whiskey Bond is saying, okay, I'm on 1 out of 4. Stick with it, Mark. Stick with it. And Lindsay Holman is saying he's in the south of England now, but in Brisbane, Australia at the time. Okay, Lindsay. Some kind of Australian eagle, I guess. Question 5 is always a picture. We're looking at a picture of a distillery. I know that you would have loved it to be Lochranza or Lagg, Andy, but it's not.
Nice.
These are always tricky, these picture questions. I'm obviously asking, what distillery are we looking at here? A, Glendronach, B, Glenglassaugh, or C, Benriach? There's a theme here. 3, what are now Brown-Forman distilleries. Once upon a time, they were Benriach distilleries. Is it Glendronach, Glenglassaugh, or Benriach? Tim is guessing that it's Glenglassaugh, as well as Neil Cochrane, Whiskey Jason, Robert Fredrickson. What do you think, Andy? Do you know this one?
I have been at Benriach. No, it's not that. I think the modernity of some of the build and the way that you've got kind of dunes and things. I was going to say Glenglassaugh, but I think I'm going to change my mind and say Glendronach.
Glendronach, eh? All you had to do was glance in the lounge at all the barflies. They've kicked out the park. They knew exactly what it was, and you second guessed yourself. It's actually, you were right the first time, Glenglassaugh, and you were going right down the right track as well when you talked about the architecture and things in terms of placing it in terms of chronologically. Glenglassaugh. Lots of people on 5 out of 5 tonight. I predict we're going to get a 10 out of 10 tonight, at least 1 or 2. That would be nice. Question 6. A release of Arran's Machrie Moor peated release is called Fingal's Cut, which refers to what? A legendary warrior giant. B, an infamous illicit distiller and smuggler. Or C, a celebrated poet and musician. So we're essentially asking, who was Fingal? Was he a warrior giant, an illicit distiller and smuggler, or a poet and musician? This is a sacking offence, Andy, if you don't know this one. Oh dear, do you know?
Oh, aye. Yeah, I know it, yeah.
No, I didn't know. I had to do a wee bit of digging and research to discover this. I actually thought it was something to do with one of the ancient Lords of the Isles, which I suppose it could potentially kind of through heritage still be.
He crops up in a lot of places.
Sorry, Andy, go.
Yeah, I'm saying Fingal crops up in a number of places.
Aye, Fingal, aye. Place names in history, folklore, but of course, Andy, what is it?
He's a legendary warrior giant.
Aye. Now I picked it up from the back of the bottle, and then I found myself in an internet rabbit hole. Going back years and years, all the Fingals is exactly as you talk about. But apparently, there's out in one of the moors in Machrie Moor itself. There's an ancient stone circle, and there's one of the stones there that actually has like some kind of cauldron base carved out of it, and it's said that that's where he used to tie his dog Bran to. So it's quite whimsical, I think.
I think if you go there, actually, there's 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 stone circles, and one of them is called Fingal's Cauldron, and that's kind of smaller stones. And then part of the circle that contains the largest stones has what I think is a millstone, actually, and it's sitting there, and it's like a donut. It's got a hole through the middle, and that's the one in question there.
That's the one he used to tie his dog to. Fantastic. So apparently Fingal was a warrior giant. Back in that day, I mean, I guess you only had to be about 5'7" to be a giant, maybe. Question 7. I've got a banana skin emoji up here. I don't know if it's really a banana skin. What happened to the production capacity of Lochranza Distillery in 2019? A, they increased by 25%. B, they reduced it by 25%. C, they stopped for 3 months. Lochranza is the original Arran distillery in the north of the island. I probably should have run this past my guests tonight first, because it's not often I have a source to double check the source that I got it from. But there you go. What happened in 2019 with the production capacity at Lochranza? Increased by 25%, reduced by 25%, stopped for 3 months. Is there an obvious answer here, Andy?
Well, I don't believe that we stopped for 3 months. We had a very hot summer, and that caused us to stop temporarily because the water coming off the river was 20 degrees, so we couldn't cool the worts. But didn't last 3 months. So I would have to say capacity in Lochranza increased by 25. I don't know, Roy. You'd have to. I don't know where you got the info. I would probably say increase.
I got this from the Malt Whisky Yearbook. And the interesting thing here was that it talked about when production sparked up and you got comfortable with the production down at Lagg, it meant that you could ease off a wee bit at Lochranza. And what you actually found over the course of 2019 was you dropped the production there because you weren't making quite as much. You were balancing out the production over the two distilleries. So based on the Malt Whisky Yearbook, the answer I was looking for was, they reduced by 25%.
Well, Langbar's the font of all knowledge, so that must be true. But I wouldn't say that the production between Lochranza and Lagg are linked necessarily. But no, there you are. Maybe he's done some pretty deep.
Or maybe it was indeed something to do with the water sources you talked about there. Jimmy Lagg Jimmy Lagg. I've made a friend of Jimmy Lagg who's not been a fan of mine in the quizzes recently. He's saying yes, he's on 7 out of 7, as is Dancing Midgie. Dancing Midgie Glenn is on 7 out of 7 as well. Well done, Glenn. Well done, Jimmy. Oh, it looks like maybe you two are the only guys. Oh no, Alan McLaughlin, 7 out of 7. Yeah, I was thinking Lagg might have played a part. And Rolf is saying, oh shit, he's not very happy tonight. He's maybe not scoring it as well as he normally would. Question 8, which of these foodstuffs are mentioned in the name of Israel's first distillery? A, oranges, B, milk, or C, a kind of cheese. There is a distillery. Maybe if Reb Mordecai is still in, I appreciate he probably is not, because Reb is in Israel, so he's at least 2 hours ahead of us, maybe 3 hours right now at this time of year. So he's probably tucked up in bed by now. Reb, I saw you in earlier. But one of your, I only know of 2 distilleries in Israel, but one of them recalls the name of a foodstuff in the distillery name. A, oranges, B, milk, or C, a kind of cheese. Have you any idea, Andy?
I reckon it must be milk and honey.
I was just looking for a yes or no.
Sorry.
But well done. Well done. Absolutely.
Okay.
You're right. The distillery is exactly that. I've got a really quite cool logo. I was quite enamored when I saw this logo. I thought it was quite nice. Perfectly summing up milk and honey. Although that animal that's pictured in the logo, you're not going to get a lot of milk from. but nice visuals anyway. This is the other distillery in Israel that I know of been Golan Heights. But the distillery, the Milk and Honey Distillery, is absolutely right. Question 9, second from last. Very self-indulgent question. I apologise for it, but I always like to throw a YouTube question in there. And just so happens that this one is one that's talking about my own channel. In the 2008 Aquavite video, The Magic of Isla, what animal bombed an interview scene near Brookladdy? So I don't know if you would call it a photo bomb, if it's video footage, video bomb. I don't know. A, a noisy black crow. B, a boisterous Highland cow. Or C, a leaping fish. What did we see in the background that kind of stole the scene while I was interviewing a guy near Brookladdy? A noisy black crow, a Highland cow, or a leaping fish? You wouldn't know this, Andy. I don't think you're that much of a... I don't know if you ever caught that video I did. It was a couple of years old.
Trying to deduce if there might be any boisterous cows paddling in Lochendal.
I think Isla has all of those things for sure.
Aye. I'm at the guess, or do you want to?
Go ahead, guess.
I like the idea of a leaping fish, so I'm going to say that.
The crowd have kicked out the park. They know exactly. They know exactly. And Kresimir is reminding of me the time that a bulb exploded in the background when I was live on a vPub as well. Yes, that happened too. But you're absolutely right about the leaping fish. I think I included a picture here, although you can't really see it here. You can see this. I don't know if it's a trout or a grayling or whatever it would be. This is in Lochendal, so it's brackish water. It's salt water. And this fish, it really acrobatically jumped out the water, did a 180, maybe as much as a 360 actually, and just landed back in with a wee splash. It's quite amazing to see. If you do head over to the Magic Isla video, if you want to see that, there's a timestamp in the description box, so you don't need to sit through the whole thing again to catch the fish photobombing. Let's see how we're doing. Second from last question. Blair Stevenson is hanging on, 4 out of 9. It's still possible. He's hoping for his pass mark tonight. You'll be clinging on, like I suppose. I don't know what's happened in America right now, but I know that there are people absolutely transfixed on the numbers there. You're hanging on a wee bit like them, Blair, tonight. I'm looking for the guys that were scoring really well. Greg's Whiskey Guide, 8 out of 9. Tim Allott, 8 out of 9. Jay Stew, that looks like a new name, Jay. Nice to welcome you in. Fantastic score as well. And welcome to the Aquavite Barflies, 8 out of 9. Hellswood, 8 out of 9. Helen, superb score. Dancing Midgie Glen is still rock solid on 9 out of 9. Looking for the other guys. Okay. Last question. This is the ass hat emoji you see down there. I've always got these questions in there, the kind of questions that make people dislike me. As the crow flies, what is the closest distillery to Lochranza after Lagg? Of course, Lagg, as the crow flies, is going to be the closest distillery. But after Lagg, what is the closest of these three? A, Glengyle, B, Ardbeg, or C, Auchentoshan? You can see why there's an asshat emoji on this one. This is not the type of question that you would expect any whiskey enthusiast to reasonably know, but if you've got a kind of half a handle on the geography out there on the West Coast, you might hazard a guess at it. Lots of guessing here. I'm looking to see what Dancing Midgie is guessing. I know that he's hanging on for, Glenn's guessed A for Glengyle. He's hanging on for his 10 out of 10. He's hoping for that. Lots of people guessing A. It's just giving them just about enough time to pull up Google Maps and had a quick look. What would you say, Andy? What do you think as the crow flies?
Glengyle. I probably have to go by that to get to. Just try
Absolutely.
to think the way that yeah.
Absolutely. Down Campbelltown is, as the crow flies, the closest. So there you go. I know that Dancing Midgie Glenn has managed to secure himself a 10 out of 10 tonight. Very well done. And let's to see Jesse Voisin is in. Is it Voisin, Jesse, or Voisin? I'm not sure. I hope I'm pronouncing your name okay. Jesse Voisin, 9 out of 10. Jesse, what a tremendous score. 1 away from 10. Dancing Midgie did get his 10 out of 10. Well done. Let's see. Oh, Bud Jenkins, go Jimmy Legg. Jimmy Legg managed at Campbelltown for the 10 out of 10 for Jimmy Legg as well. Well done, my friend. Good to see you scoring a 10 out of 10 tonight, Blair. Well done. Anybody else on a 10 out of 10? I'm scrolling down. Alan McLaughlin is saying, yes, 10 out of 10, my second 10 out of 10 in a row. You're killing it, Alan. You're maybe hanging out a wee bit too much in the vPub. Maybe you need to take a wee bit of time off. Wonderful stuff. Ross Fudd, good to see you in. That's obviously my friend Thomas. He's on 8 out of 10. Tom Elmer. Claude Hooker, 7 out of 10. Stewie Baby, 6 out of 10. Graham Fraser on an 8 out of 10. A sterling effort. I think it's a tremendous effort. Helen on 8 out of 10 in the end. Still a great score. Dirty Dog, 7 out of 10. Worth a dram. Absolutely. Dirty Dog, I would second you on that. Ewan Walker. Just as a chat jumps, 8 out of 10 for the first live quiz. Dead chuffed. You should be as well. Welcome in, Ewan. It's a new name. Nice to have you here. Head is saying, Dancing Midgie, congrats on his 9 out of 10. Let's raise a wee glass. Andy, to the guys, Alan McLaughlin, Jimmy Legg, and who was the other guy? Glenn, Dancing Midgie, all 10 out of 10s, and anybody that got a pass tonight. Thank you very much. Well done, Slancha, to the quiz participants. The Arran 18 is still a lovely dram, lovely, rich round. Alan McLaughlin can track Stewie Baby saying, congrats, Alan, a 10 out of 10 sniper. Alan was saying, thanks again, Roy, for a brilliant VPub. Thanks again to your super guests, Andy and James. Thank you, absolutely, Helen, for your nice words. Like I say, anybody that's got any questions or comments, leave it in the comments after the video below. It sometimes takes a wee while before you can access those comments. I know it can be tricky. Thank you all for your participation tonight. Apologies if I missed questions and things in the live chat. Please leave them under the video, and I'll try and encourage Jackie, Andy, and the team to come in after the event and feedback and interact with you a wee bit in the comments. Andy, thanks so much for taking me on. Thanks for getting James involved. Thanks to Jackie. I can see Jackie's still in the background. I'll just give her a wee thumbs up and say thanks for looking after me in the background tonight, Jackie, as well. I was sincere in everything I said tonight, and I continue to wish you all the very, very best over Arran. I think it's great what you're doing. Please keep the prices fair. Please keep the presentation honest, and please keep everything independent and pointed directly at us as enthusiasts.
I'm sure you'll do your thing in keeping us honest, Roy, I'm sure.
Aye, absolutely, absolutely. Odd Johan Lundberg is saying thank you for an interesting evening. Thank you, Johan, as always. It's nice to have you in. Thanks, Roy and fellow barflies. Sweet dreams, says Stu Baby. Helenswood is saying cheers and good night. Tim Donnerpass Whiskey is saying, have the older bottling of Arran 18. Amazing. Here, the new bottling is more of a sherry bomb. I would say that that's true, Andy. You would agree with that the sherry impact, the sherry influence has been cranked up. Probably get so much to do with kind of more mature, deeper stocks, I would guess. Jimmy Legg is saying, he's bought me a dram, saying, Roy, I'm so happy that you're our voice when you speak with the giants of the industry. There is a lot of knowledge here and you represent it so well. Thanks, Jimmy. You're always making me blush. That's really nice of you to say. And I think, honestly, that's kind of you that makes that happen. You know, these guys, they're not going to waste their time coming on and just speaking to a wee guy in a spare room in his house on YouTube if it wasn't for the fact that they could connect with so many people that are already invested in what they do. So it's thanks to the community. That's the only reason it can happen, is the guys that come along, watch, interact, leave a like, leave a thumbs up, leave the comments below, and just interact and give the community, give the channel the lifeblood that you bring along. It's thanks to you, Jimmy. Thank you so much, my friend. And thank you for your virtual dram. Cheers. Alistair Gray is in tonight. He says, good night, Aquavita and the Barflies. I did mention the bottle of Kilkerran that you've donated to the community. Alistair, you and I will need to get together to work out how we share that, and along with Sid Martin's Macallan that he's sent in as well. Andy, I hope you enjoyed yourself tonight.
Immensely.
I think if you're up for it, I think there's plenty of scope in the future for me to drag you in for future projects. It's a safe space. It's never a place that you can come in and be. You might be held to account from time to time. You might have to deal with awkward questions, but I've been in your presence often enough to know that you're more than comfortable with it. And it's a pleasure to have had you behind the bar and the vPub tonight, my friend. Thank you so much. Thanks to Jackie for setting up and making it happen. And thanks to your gaffer over there in Isla, James MacTaggart, for being such a gentleman. And I hope he enjoyed his time tonight as well. Andy, stay in the background, and I'll have a wee debrief with you and raise a glass off air. But sure. I appreciate it, my friend. Thanks for coming in. Cheers.
Slàinte, Roy. Cheers, and cheers, everybody.
Good night. I'm especially grateful for that wonderful 25-year-old he gave me. Absolute pleasure to have welcomed you all here tonight. A week from now, I'm hoping to get together with Roddy. I know you've all been missing Roddy. I know you're asking for him all the time. And I would like to, Roddy and I are hoping to put together something. If it's not next week, it'll be the week after. I'm pretty sure it's going to be next week, where we're talking about the balance of spirit and cask. And there might be a wee kind of blind sample exchange between us to try and illustrate that. If there's a way that we can extend that out to you, or find some way to, it's difficult with it being blind, to share what drams we're going to have in advance. But I'll work on that over the next few days and share it with you. Watch this space. In a couple of weeks' time, I'm hoping to pull off something that we can get together and talk about the value of blended malts, and why I think that it's where the value and so much engagement in whiskey is right now. And I'm going to get together with somebody. I hope if we can pull it off, it should be quite fun to talk about malts in the future, either 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now as well. So there are lots of plans for the vPub going forward. And I look forward to welcoming you all back for some of those in the future. In the meantime, thank you all for hanging out with me tonight. As always, you're very dearly loved, beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. I will see you next week. And I very much look forward to that. Until then, slàinte. Good night.